of emceeing the Future of Media program. So welcome, Marcus. He's joining in just a second. I see him. He's there. Give him a second. Marcus hosted us in July, and I first met him in January at our Brand Innovators Super Bowl event hosted by Burger King in Miami. It was an awesome way to start off the year, and we had fantastic speakers, of course, from Fernando Machado, and we had amazing speakers from New Balance, and of course the Yum brands, Frito-Lay. So it's just a great program, and it was the kickoff for many of our brands, really, with the Brand Innovators series in 2020. And then, of course, one of the few events that we had before the pandemic started in person. And then we transitioned in April to our virtual series, April 1st. For those of you who haven't tuned in, if this is your first time, we've actually just celebrated our 100th live cast this past month. It was honestly a really proud moment for Brand Innovators. We, like most companies, pivoted hard in April, and we were really excited to feature so many great marketers on the stage. Everyone from our first live cast with the CMO of SAP, Alicia Tillman, to Raja from MasterCard, to all these other great CMOs and VPs of marketing from Fortune 500 companies across the US and across the nation, including internationally. Jorma, who's joining us momentarily, is joining us from overseas. So we'll get to hear a little bit about where he's from and some of the work that he's up to. But it's been really interesting in the virtual world to be able to reach so many marketers and engage with so many marketers from wherever they are. And I think that's something that we've really enjoyed. In the physical world, of course, we had great reach, but it was all local, right? So we would be able to go to Fortune 500 brands across the nation, and we would be able to reach them in the offices of brands, and that was great. And we would do our roadshow across the country, to all these brands, 50 plus events a year. And so now we just love the fact that we can reach so many people without that barrier. So while we look forward to physical events coming back in the future, whenever it's safe to do so, we're really excited. So now I think without further ado, our friend Marcus is here. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Marcus, how are you?
Okay, it's finally working.
Yay, there he is.
But of course, because this is live, guess what, Lauren? I've lost my script. So how about you send me a link so I can remember what I'm supposed to be telling everyone. So I had a whole glitch. I had to shut everything down and start again, but it means that my whole setup is gone.
Hey, listen, that's totally fine. What is a virtual event without a little technical glitch, right? I'm sending that over to you right now. But Marcus, I was just telling the team while that makes its way to you, I was just telling everybody tuned in about first how we met at Super Bowl earlier this year, and then just how great it's been to be able to reach so many marketers across the country and really the world, including Jorma, who's joining us momentarily, who's overseas. And so that's really been such a benefit for our community.
Well, Lauren, what you didn't tell everyone is that I was so grateful to be invited to Super Bowl. And obviously, I'm not an American. I've never been to a Super Bowl before. And I came all the way down there and I was so excited. And then you told me that I was invited to the event, but not the actual Super Bowl. So I'm not going to hold that against you anymore. But, you could have next year. Could you try harder?
Yes, I will.
So listen, Lauren, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you. I'm grateful for everyone for putting up with me. And I'm going to try and regain composure after some of these little problems. But listen, thank you very much to everyone. Very quickly, the trade desk, I'm responsible for our relationship with a number of the largest global brands and partners. And I was just asked to share a few quick insights, and I'm going to make them even quicker than I was going to before. But in terms of what are the most important asks that we're getting from brands in terms of the future of media. So I guess the first one really is holistic measurement and return on investment. And that basically means that brands are asking us to help them get control of how they measure and optimize media, not in isolation, but across the entire addressable spectrum. So that means streaming TV, it means what they're doing on audio, web, podcasts, everything, control across the whole spectrum. The second theme is agility and flexibility. And I know that we're going to hear from a lot of the speakers today about this. Obviously, 2020, you don't need me to tell you guys how turbulent this year's been. All of the work that you did, the assumptions, the forecast, and all of the plans, I guess they're all ripped up in around March or April. So for 2021, we know that consumer behavior will continue to shift rapidly, and all of the brands are asking us to help them stay nimble. And that really means that they want to increase their ability to access sort of new channels that provide more flexibility than perhaps they had before, in terms of ability to adjust what they're doing with media and advertising in real time based on what's happening to the consumer. And that's the flexibility that's crucially important, I think, to the future of media. That probably brings us to the third theme, and I'm going to make this the last theme, which is CTV. Probably the biggest single shift to our industry, and it's all driven by consumers. I don't know if you guys know this, but of course there were lots of predictions of how streaming was going to catch up with cable and how cable cord cutting was going to go. But probably a lot, but because of COVID, streaming now for the first time has overtaken cable. There are now more households streaming than there are watching cable. And the great thing for advertisers is that CTV enables the application of data. So for the first time, you can apply all of your proprietary data to your television buy. And let's face it, television is the biggest canvas and it's often, almost always, the most important element of the budget. So of course, CTV is going to be a massive focus for brands going forward. But I think most importantly, I'm now sort of super thrilled to welcome our first speakers of the day. Guys, can you see me? You need to unmute. You'll do a better job than I did of unmuting yourself and putting the video on.
I think it's working, Marcus. How you doing?
Well, really good, really good. I'm not sure if I started that out very well, but I think you both look very composed and great. So
following your lead.
Thank you so much. So just to quickly introduce you both, Jorma Kremse. Jorma, you're the global media manager at Bose, managing paid media across all channels in North America and EMEA. And the session is going to be moderated by your friend Matthew Doherty, who's the regional VP for sales for Teads. And guys, I've had a little look at what you guys are going to be talking about, and I think it's really exciting. We're going to explore how the media world has been disrupted, the examples of what you've had to contend with this year, Jorma. And I guess you're going to discuss all the looming trends that's going to affect our ecosystem going forward. So we expect all the answers from you. I'm going to hand over to you both now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus. And it's a pleasure to be here today. Jorma, thank you for, you got dressed up for me. I said there's a sweater on, you got the collared shirt. I appreciate that very much. And just to quickly run through introductions again, my name is Matt Doherty. I run East Coast for Teads, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by my friend Jorma, who is the global media manager for Bose, to discuss what is admittedly a pretty broad topic in the future of media. And I have to say, it seems fitting, maybe even a bit poetic, given the current state of affairs in the United States, to be discussing the topic of the future with a European. And, you know, I think what the focus today, because it's such a broad topic, was, Jorma, what we kind of, when we sat down and chatted about this, we said, let's kind of explore how the media world has been disrupted in the near term, given there's been plenty of that, and certainly a lot of salient insight from your side to share. And then also look at how some of the looming trends that the market has and industry has been kind of positing and predicting for the last few years, how those might affect those trends might affect the ecosystem's long-term outlook. So I think we'll try to save some time at the end for questions. So please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them at the end of today's conversation. But Jorma, if you're good with it, let's start with the short term. What's right in front of us. And I think there's no better place to start than to talk about the upcoming holiday season, because there's obviously been a ton of disruption this year. We don't need to rehash that. But shopping and consumer behaviors, and Marcus mentioned this in the introduction, have clearly been heavily impacted and have been changed as a result. So, my first question, what I'd love to start today's conversation with, is to better understand how, as a luxury brand, how is Bose approaching the upcoming holiday season this year, and specifically, have you changed or adapted your e-com and acquisition approach at all? How are you preparing for a reduction in foot traffic that's being kind of expected and called for from the traditional brick and mortar retail channels?
Love the question. And God, it has been a year, and we're really proud to be at that point in the calendar where we're facing some more of a positive side of the year with the holidays coming up. And I'm proud of a company that has managed really well through these times, but there have been a lot of challenges thrown at each and every one of us in the industry. Alongside that, we also saw a few opportunities, and now back to the holiday, we're very excited to be at that point, and we're entering the season with more focus than ever before, if I can say that. The e-commerce approach that we're taking and the acquisition strategy has definitely somewhat changed, but taking a step back before even COVID came, if anyone can remember those days, we've already announced a reduction in our own stores, and with that came the challenges of physical traffic, physical sales falling somewhat away, but that was accounted for. With COVID, there wasn't any help coming, and we saw that traffic go down so badly and so heavily also with our resellers that definitely posed a few challenges. Physical store sales are important. Physical product demos are really essential, as well as trials as part of our business. So in a way, we stepped on this path before COVID, but we had to speed up a lot when that one hit us. And also, as a media manager, in terms of media, we've set out to increasingly leverage digital channels a while back, seeing basically that the consumer and her touch points have increasingly become a digital nature. We understood that, and we had great opportunity to bridge a gap between the consumer journey when, in traditional senses, we advertised the upper funnel and somewhat caught sales in the lower funnel. We were now able to measure exactly the connection of that consumer journey. I've extensively worked with my colleagues who look after first-party data to identify opportunities to tie these knots between upper and lower funnel, and we've had applied learnings about existing customers, where they came from, how they purchased, what they purchased, and that helped us a great deal to target potentially new ones. And so we did a lot of groundwork in the past, and it really, it's picking up a lot now.
And Jorma, I think something that was really interesting to me is, for a brand that is such a tactile and trial-based brand, to now kind of adjust to, a commercial strategy now that is very dependent on virtual retailing. How have you guys married that? Is that a challenge? Is it an opportunity for you? Is there anything that you've done to kind of adjust the sales experience accordingly?
We've done a lot of work, and really big shout out to everyone involved in that, because digital isn't just a function or a department at Bose. Everything over the last couple of months, even years maybe, has set out in motion to transition to ever more digital. And if you go to our product page for frames, the sunglasses with embedded sound, you'll see that the customer experience has been enhanced, and you can try the frames on much like a Snapchat lens nowadays. So we adopted that trial to get the customer experience almost as good. And also, if you own any pair of headphones, preferably Bose, of course, you can jump on our soundbar pages and learn the difference between watching an NFL game with the soundbar and without. And that's one thing I personally advise everyone to try, because I have to admit, before working for Bose, TV sounded good enough for me, watching anything like concerts, movies, whatever it is. But ever since I had my first speaker set, I cannot experience or have the same excitement when I experience sound, at least not without the bass. So yeah, that's two hands-on demonstrations how we embrace the digital transition. On the one hand, with the experience and providing trial online. At the same time, on a more e-commerce focused projects, we also extended our trial periods. So when the consumer gives us the trust of purchasing a product without the capability of trying it in the physical store environment, we kind of embrace that trust and reward it with a longer product trial. And if it, doesn't function well enough for the consumer, or he doesn't like it and love it, he can send us back.
And it's not just obviously the digital experience that's changed, but Jorma, one area, an arena of media that we talked about quite a bit in our pre-call was the linear world has really changed too. And so, it's interesting because obviously there's been, no one has been impervious to this disruption, but specifically when the pandemic, with the onset of the pandemic, with the events and live sports programming being heavily impacted, which is historically an area that Bose has really had a significant presence in, with sponsorship with NFL and Formula One. And I'm just curious, has your approach to live programming changed at all? Has the pandemic forced you to reimagine some of the live and event-based sponsorships that Bose is participating in for the remainder of this year or next year? And maybe is there any kind of unique opportunity, given the fluidity of event scheduling these days, that might present?
It's definitely gotten a lot different, right? Before entering into the existing partnerships we have, I do want to mention that we shouldn't forget about the partnerships we just announced with Riot. While it's certainly different and new to us type of partnership, it's massive, with these events drawing crowds unimaginable, easily filling stadiums the size of NFL stadiums, depending on event and regions. Not to mention the online viewership and the engagement. And if you allow the short excursion, gaming in my mind has evolved so much over the last few years that it's really hard to imagine having a communication approach of any kind without it playing a role.
Yeah.
Now, shifting that to live programming, with the right partnership came the World Championships, which you can see online, but not in the arena. That was definitely a pity. But our approach to live programming was and is, much as with any research done in our company, it's based on where the consumer needs. We see that live sports play a great role in consumers' lives. And I mean, when politicians were debating on how we should look at office, work from home, transportation systems, theaters and schools, all in light of COVID, one of the fastest going back to normal industries we saw were live sports events. Without the fans, that is, but the teams were rushing to get back to the season schedules, even if that meant having to let go of some of the awesome live and site experiences. And there was a reason why German Bundesliga was shown in the US, because they were the first ones back on the pitch, which is kind of amazing. Soccer not being that much of or that big of a sport in the US, at least when it comes to TV. Anyways, with that in mind, we understood that the consumption of sports has followed a path to digital. And while linear TV still broadcasts many of the events, and we love to be part of it, much of the infrastructure around the sport is happening and consumed online. And so in essence, we apply a good mix of this approach to our audiences.
I think that basing the message around the consumer need is just something has only become highlighted and underscored as increasingly important in all of this. And you start certainly seeing brands make a conscious effort to kind of recognize that and adjust their approach accordingly. And on the kind of buying side of things, as you look to kind of next year's activation, whatever you can share, obviously, do you see there being any impact on linear TV? Do you think, like, for example, the upfronts might look different this year, given all that uncertainty? And how are you guys approaching that?
I have to be honest, I haven't been to any upfronts in the US. Here in Europe, they certainly have changed in terms of format. Obviously, they're digital in nature. And as Mark has stated in the opening, there's a lot of conversations on connected TV, and we embrace it so much. However, in the running up to this, and especially during the last couple of months, there's so much conversations and messages from linear TV broadcasters and how their consumption of their product has increased dramatically, which is great for them, as they've seen some decline over the last years, even though they've never really died the death that some of the industry specialists have foreseen. But in between COVID and the presidential election today, numerous occasions have been arising where consumers were glued to their TV to quench the thirst for the latest news. And I expect, in the upfronts to see a lot of these rising graphs showing that trend. However, at the same time, I do see that linear TV share in the entertainment area has suffered severely. And that's where consumers showed us very clearly of where the path leads all around in terms of what type of content to produce, how to serve it, and honestly, where brands potentially fit into that journey. And I have a funny kind of example when regarding my family and my kids. I have 4 kids ranging from 1 to 11. So that's how I can future-proof any and every kind of media understanding that I think I have, and I have less than I thought. But this summer, we watched some movie together on a German TV broadcast station, and the movie was great. And when the first ad break came up, they were entertained and watched it. But after the 3rd, 4th, or 5th, they were going berserk. They wouldn't understand why it wouldn't stop. And when the second ad break came on, it became really clear that we're not going to finish that movie. And then that really shows that the change is inevitable. It's on a larger scale. And even if we live in this industry bubble and we have maybe a somewhat diversified media consumption versus the general population, I think linear TV has a few challenges, and they need to kind of pick up on that. And you can also see the adoption of this target audience in new media in out of home, where some of the posters become TikTok videos where models and brands represent themselves. So I think it's a great shift, and it's hitting us, and change is the only constant in the game.
Absolutely. Couldn't be more true. And it's being exacerbated, certainly has been over the course of this year. And you mentioned connected TV as an emerging channel, and we heard Marcus kind of mention it as well in his introduction. I'm wondering, does the disruption that's been caused maybe pave the way for a brand like Bose to explore, invest deeper in other maybe lesser known strategies or lesser invested in strategies, like I'm thinking influencer or virtual eventing, things like that? Has that been, have you seen that as an opportunity? And if so, are there any channels in particular that have piqued your interest?
Oh, it's definitely an interesting field, and it's always good for us to explore. Shortly going back to connected TV, there's a big thirst on our side, and we're really welcoming the up and coming also cross-border offerings that the linear stations have collaborated together in order to achieve this offering, and it's very much appreciated. When it comes to influencers, virtual eventing, basically we've jumped on that ship a while ago already, because we're never really satisfied with the status quo at Bose, and are given a mandate to question the now and research and experiment. And then in essence, we're an R&D company. So if anything, this investigation needs to be ongoing, and factually always has been. Right? The closer you look at your audiences, the more diversified you find it is. And in order to address our consumers, we always needed to leverage multiple touch points, multiple storytellers, and messages. And in that context, influencers, athletes, talents, everything came into play. And we're building it out, and we're definitely amplifying that. So if anything, the disruption has maybe enforced us more usage rather than creating it from scratch.
And it's so funny to hear you refer to Bose as an R&D company, essentially, because so many of us as consumers view it as this luxury brand. But I know, and because I grew up not too far from Bose HQ in the U.S. and outside of Boston, that it's all about the technology inside of those walls, right? I mean, company was founded by an MIT graduate, I believe that's right, and it's funny. Right. How much pride the business takes in their technology. That's really the pride point. So it's cool to see that kind of, I think that's a really interesting perspective, and it's cool to see that start to imbue itself in different ways in terms of how you're testing out different channels and trying out different approaches in the media sphere specifically. Let's turn the page to, we've been talking short term. Let's turn the page to the long term. And one topic that I'd be keen to get your thoughts on is, there's been lots of conversation looming around and lots of uncertainty looming certainly around the market on the deprecation of the cookie, on iOS 14 and IDFA blocking, and all of these sort of moves being seen as moves towards increasing user privacy. I'm just curious where you stand on the subject. Is this something that is a topic you guys are talking about internally? Do you see this as a threat or an opportunity? And are there potentially some existing solutions or conversations that you're having right now that you're exploring to potentially future-proof against this?
Oh, looking into the future. I first and foremost see any increase in the protection of consumer privacy as a positive and even as a must-have. And okay, maybe I'll have a few more challenges in targeting the right audience at the right time with the right message on the right device, etc. But honestly, I wouldn't want it any other way if that meant intruding in whatever shape or form in something where someone does not want me to interfere in. And every advertiser that is familiar with the term brand safety must be equally aware of their customers' need to be treated in a safe way. And I think we as an industry need to kind of put that as a priority out there. That's my pitch. The term at play here is, I think, knowledge asymmetry. And in my mind, it always leaves one side with an advantage and the other one with a potential disadvantage. And in this digital world, there's a strong delta between what consumer knows and what we know about tracking. And a good way or a good example of that might be your reaction, Matt, or my reaction versus my partner's when we watched The Social Dilemma versus the response, right, to people not working in the industry. Most of us probably knew a great deal about what was shown and with a few caveats here and there. But outside of that, people were probably shocked, or maybe not. Do they care about being tracked or not? You can ask. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it's, I think, a clear sign that they don't understand the value of this tracking. And in order to ensure a fair trade between the knowledge that we have and the products that we advertise, this knowledge gap needs to be bridged. In my mind, that shows that we need guiding principles to ensure fair trade and a good relationship. And so I think the measures that you mentioned above at least help putting this topic back on consumers' minds and also on, maybe legislations. Bottom line, I think we must treat consumer privacy with the highest level of priority. And this bears opportunities because in order to win in this, we really need to get closer to understanding customer needs. We need to do this in a fair way, but we also need to show the customer that we respect that. And we need to, gain that understanding and build from that on up. And something that I think, especially looking at Bose for the last couple of years, we've excelled in that when building our products.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think it's, it's great to hear a brand thinking this way about sort of the value transaction, the value exchange between user privacy and what liberties we may take as, in terms of messaging, and always a tweetable machine with the knowledge is a symmetry quote. I think I'm sure that's probably already been posted. And I'm wondering, do you think that there's potential, this represents potential challenges, or do you have concerns that your business is growing increasingly in the e-com space, you're shuttering brick and mortar stores in favor of selling online, but these changes potentially impact your ability to measure, to do sort of sophisticated attribution within the digital sector? Is that something that you guys are just saying, listen, we're okay with it? Or is there sort of another approach that you're taking to address that head on?
Good question. And we're testing and probing, right? There are a lot of good opportunities to get in touch with our consumers with their consent and ask for that value exchange, which does exactly that. But those, in comparison to the overall playing field, are just fewer. And so we're getting more selective in that respect. We have to be. And we have worked and learned a lot in advertising and understand the different scenarios that good contextual advertising practices come with, right? Even before the digital capability of measuring it. So on the one side, we advertise where we know our audience is, and we know that the content they consume is the content they love, and we can jump on that, be it sport, music, passion points that are part of people's lives. And at the same time, we can leverage our knowledge given the context of our audience in the given situation, varying from a more leaned back TV approach to a more leaned in mobile approach. So the ad experience itself needs to be different, and we can leverage our knowledge with the selected partners to gain an advantage in that game. But we also value our partners and those that have substantial first-party data that we can leverage. And we have embraced the journey to learn more from our consumers by means of apps that are aimed to enhance the listening experience. So we've been working on that, and that's been something new for us. And via the apps, we could get in touch with the consumer and allow the consumer to get in touch with us and keep the conversation going. maybe the one weakness in all of that is the complete attribution, and what Marcus said in the beginning, the capability of measuring each incremental impact of every media message, whatever part of the communication has hit the consumer. And I'm really happy to, people like Trade Desk and Teads and others out there are helping brands and each other to find a way to enhance the capability of a transparent measurement system.
And I'm glad you brought that up, especially because, where my head goes to next is with these changes, the insular networks, let's call them, what historically known as walled gardens, seem to have an advantage, right? They can bring their own attribution tools, their own measurement and tracking tools, and introduce those and can sort of evaluate their own ecosystem accordingly. And Bose has taken, a stance, pretty strong stance as recently as this summer on, really being promoting equity within the ecosystem, and giving kind of a fair shot to media players, both big and small. So I guess the question is, what's your view? What do you think if we extrapolate some of these user privacy changes that we expect to be implemented, does that change your view one way or the other, positive or negative, on the walled gardens? And do you plan to expand beyond them? Where do you all see opportunity to do so?
I believe that walled gardens have developed a great product to generate revenue, first and foremost, for them, but also connect people, serve content that's highly relevant and appreciated, and enabled us brands to leverage that, even though they have a proper advantage maybe towards other platforms. They also showed us that their platform works. So it's a great product with a lot of winners on the side, right? But naturally, we have to keep an eye on what's at play on a larger scale. And in light of your intro to this question, we have to assess our position continuously. And I think brands have a responsibility in that respect. And we witnessed that the effort paid off. Now, I think beyond walled gardens is a natural must for any and everyone in the game. And the strong network of close partnerships is one area where I foresee more opportunities. Mentioned before, the value exchange I really aim for with these partners will be based on a thoroughly researched framework and the potentially mutual exchange of first-party data on a longer-term approach.
Great. Okay, we've reached the lightning round here, Jorma. So I've got a few that I'm just going to fire off at you and give me your thoughts on it. So the first is, in your position, I think you are fortunate to get to sample all of the sort of latest and greatest technology, both obviously within the consumer electronics space as an R&D company, of course, but also with the media focus as well. And so I'm curious if there's one innovation or technology that you've seen or heard about recently that really gets you excited, one that excites you the most.
Okay, it might not be the most recent one, and I'm sorry to drag this lightning around on maybe a lengthier answer, but so there's still room for improvement when it comes to real-time voice translation. This is what I'm really excited about. If you've seen my LinkedIn profile, I speak about 5 languages, of which 3 near native. And I always tell my kids how great it feels to be able to walk into a country and connect to the people and the culture and experience that. And language is a key item that enables people to connect to each other. So I've seen stuff in app development and come across a Chinese company called iFlight Tech, where people speak into a device. It's being translated into the language of your choice. And I would love to see maybe a pair of Bose frames or a headset that does exactly that, right? Maybe a bit Star Trek-y, but real-time voice translation. You speak in English und ich rede mit dir auf Deutsch, wo du jetzt gar nichts verstehst, but you would understand that. And that, I think, is a dream of mine.
I love it. I mean, wasn't expecting to get full German on this call. But I love it. I love it. Okay, another one for you. So, we've got, I think, folks from all different sectors on this call today. It's great, which is great. And I think you've given some really candid answers about how much those values and treats it appreciates the value exchange between consumer privacy and marketplace messaging. And that's certainly a big takeaway for me. But let's put on your mentor hat for a second. And if you've got a up-and-coming consumer technology brand that's sitting on the call right now, that's building their business from scratch, from the ground up, You give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'd say fail fast and cheap. Keep your eye on the ball, meaning the consumer. Focus on delivering the value to them while not being afraid to climb the tree on the wrong branch and realize that on the journey up. And it's a quote I stole from our founder, Dr. Bose. He said that research is much like climbing a tree, and every once in a while, even though you're climbing up, you will find yourself on the wrong branch and not the trunk, and you'll reach that position. Have the guts to go back and find another way up until you reach the top, and that's it. Don't give up.
Fail fast. I think something that we could all take into our
Don't be afraid of it. Celebrate it.
I love it. I promise we've saved time for questions, and I see that we have a couple here. And please, if anyone has any, put them here in the chat. So first one here: what innovations and technologies are you utilizing to execute your strategies, and how has that changed since the pandemic began?
Wow, a lot of them. So some of that I mentioned, right? The customer experience on site, leveraging first-party data and putting that into a technological targeting machine, maybe leveraging artificial intelligence onto that. So it's customer experience innovations as well as media innovations that we aim to close the loop between communication and e-commerce with.
And I see a few questions coming in about Bose's approach to emerging media channels and how they factor into the overall strategy. It seems particularly there's some interest in how heritage brands can learn from digital never brands or digital first brands when it comes to authentic communication and messaging to the Gen Z audience that generally a bit more cynical.
So we're a research company, right? We research an audience. I research media, and my approach to media investments are basically structured into a 70-20-10 approach. 70% of my investment needs to generate the ROI that I need in order to go back to the business and say, my campaign, my communication has been a success. The 10%, I'll skip the 20 for a minute, is answering that question, is going after the up and coming, the stuff that's new on the market that hasn't been tried or vetted by anyone or anybody. And I jump on these with a given hope that they might work in terms of my researching the media channel or the media technology or whatever it is. And then seeing how this is a continuous flow of where I'm trying to find these 10% items and pushing them over into the 20 or the 70 bracket.
And are there particular success metrics that you look at or benchmarks that you see along the way where it's a signal to you to say, okay, this justifies moving to the 10 to the 20 to the 70?
It's difficult with benchmarks at the 10% bracket, but we have a grid and we have an understanding whether it's customer engagement that we're looking for or within a given creative, because there's a lot of innovations out there that point to that, or if it's the consumer behavior on our site, or if it's, how long does it take to get the consumer down to the funnel and to purchase? What is he going to say about the product afterwards? Those are all metrics that we employ. There's a ton of more, but these are the key ones.
That's great. Another question coming in is, what trends in consumer behavior are of particular importance to you and marketers now? How are they consuming media differently? So I guess really looking for, are there specific trends, consumer trends that are of higher importance, more significant value to you that Bose looks at as a accurate representation of the marketplace?
I think the line I said earlier is it's the COVID and the pandemic causing a lot of us staying at home has amplified something that was already there in terms of consumption. We've done our Netflix binge watching for 5 years now, but it's been increasing. It's been the scale that it has reached and hit larger audiences has increased. And so I think the consumption has just been amplified in that sense. I'm not sure if it's gone completely different. I don't think consumer behavior as such changes that rapidly. I think it's impacted. It might go back to somewhat level of normal. It's difficult to foresee, but in keeping the communication open with the consumers, we're trying to gain as much understanding, as many insights, and actioning these insights in media plans and on our site.
And within this sort of digital sector, just going back to the fact that, benchmarking and finding success metrics themes can be challenging, particularly when you're exploring emerging formats and emerging technologies. But are there kind of, tried and true digital benchmarks that you're looking at and are you evolving that at all? You're hearing a lot in the space these days around hot button topics around attention economy and, moving from things like, not to get too tactical, but moving from viewability to time spent. How's Bose approaching that with regards to digital media and kind of benchmarking success accordingly?
We have our pillars, right? So there's a place for time spent on an ad, time spent on a site, and we're employing these. There's also a clickable, a viewable, and there's brand safety measures that we cannot forget about. We're basically putting all that in the box, and depending on the activity that we're looking at, applying these in a very rigid way. That's not to say that those can't change. For example, we've had measures that address the quality of traffic by means of time spent on site or pages viewed, and we're gradually having evolved this to a somewhat more solidified metric. So there's constant changes in that game.
And is there any one that stands out to you that you guys value more than the next, or is it pretty equitable in that sense?
It is pretty equitable. Yeah. It really, I have to say.
That's great. Well, listen, the clock has just struck 1, which means I think that we're out of time. But this was an absolute pleasure, John. I always love chatting with you. It's been great, and I think to get this level of candor from someone in your position about your approach to the marketplace, how you're looking at some of the looming trends that are certainly going to impact our lives as we go into next year and beyond, has been just for me really insightful and has been great to hear. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Matt. Really, likewise. I love chatting to you.
Guys, thank you so much. That was so interesting. I think we all enjoyed. There's a few points I took from you guys. Learning from existing customers to find new ones. That's a sort of really interesting theme. Pushing the industry to work together, I think, was some good points that you both made. And then we definitely learned from the Jorma Kremser family experience that you all need to work together to build a sort of better value exchange for the consumers, because perhaps young people aren't so keen on 15 ads, per ad break and every ad break every 5 minutes. So that's what we all need to focus on. Guys, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you
very much.
Bye-bye.
Right. So Jorma and Matthew have set us up in our virtual living room with a really great sound bar where we're all sort of getting ready to watch some entertainment. And our next fireside chat is all going to be about the food that we consume. So we're now ready. We've got the TV, we've got the sound bar ready, and now I think it's time to be pizza heroes. So I'm really excited to introduce our next fireside chat, which is with Mark Messing, who's the Director of Digital Marketing at Domino's, and Ken Harlan, who's the founder and CEO of Mobilefus. And I think what we're going to hear quite a lot about, what I'm certainly hoping that we're going to hear about is the theme of innovation in the context of the future of media. Because Mark, I think, has been heavily involved with some of the new product builds that have turned customer ordering and delivery into a great experience. And I think Mark and Ken are also going to discuss the sort of general shift towards measurement and effective targeting. So welcome to the virtual living room, guys. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Marcus. Happy to be here. Mark, good to see you.
Good to see you, Ken.
All right. So before we get started, I think it'd be great for everyone to hear a little bit about you and your background before we talk into how pizza can be actually considered technology and innovation. So there's a lot of fun to talk about, but please share your background.
I think I might go with Marcus's description of pizza hero. So that's I have about 12 years of digital marketing experience. I had an internship at Quicken Loans. that turned into 6 years at Starcom, the media agency, all in digital. And then I have been at Domino's for about 6 years, and just in various roles. It's just been a fantastic place to be. Who doesn't love marketing pizza? It's a fun thing. So I've really enjoyed it for sure.
That's great. That's great. And for those that don't know who I am, I'm the founder and CEO of Mobilefus. We have hundreds of clients ranging across many different verticals. We work with agencies and brands for specifically when it comes to advertising inside of apps. And this has obviously been a crazy year with so many shifting their spend that way because of what's been going on. And we'll touch on that. So, Mark, before we talk about what's been happening with Domino's lately, right? Let's go back. I mean, if you actually even look at, say, the stock price, the stock was really low years ago, and it's taken off. But where was Domino's as a company, 3 to 5 years ago, and what was it dealing with then?
Yeah, I would even take it back a little farther. About 10 years ago is sort of when the pizza turnaround happened, a little bit more than that. And that was when, we came out as a brand and said, listen, we think that our pizza needs to be improved. And the commercials were very direct, basically, showing focus groups of people not liking Domino's pizza and recognizing that we needed to fix it. Really established the product in terms of we were going to rebuild the product, the base product that was most important to folks, the food. And I think that platform of innovation was so important for everything that was built on top of it, right? All of the technology we've built since then to make it easy for people to order that food, and all of the amazing places we've gone has really been stood up on that product innovation. But the journey as I've been involved with it, has included new ordering channels, people being able to order using emojis from text, from Twitter. It's involved self-driving delivery. It's involved hotspots so that you could get pizza delivered to you from whether you were on a beach or in a park or at your home. And so, really the innovation that's been built on top of just that one thing, that product foundation, has been really something that it's been great to be a part of. And I think when I look at it, so much of it has been about solving a problem, like being transparent about what the problem is and focusing on solving a problem for customers. And that's the tone that was set with that pizza turnaround campaign. And that's been applied to so many different areas of the business, even our pizza tracker, right, where you can just see the different stages your pizza. And we were very early with that type of technology. And I think that is the really perfect example of what we're aiming for with technology, is to say, what is a problem in this process that we can solve, and then focus the technology on solving that problem.
Right. So it comes down to the product first, and then how do you distribute it and make it easier for customers to order and be a part of that, right? And so you mentioned a lot of different interesting ways that, there's more ways to order Domino's than any other company that I'm aware of.
And, right? That might be true, yeah.
but what's funny is, or interesting is, a lot of that was available before 2020. So, yeah. Can you share a little bit about with what was available prior? A lot of things you mentioned there were prior, and then what changed in 2020? What additions were made? What did you sense that consumers, Domino's did so much, but consumers needed, things to change a little bit during 2020. What were some of those things, and how did Domino's continue to innovate?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the restaurant industry in general has been very slow to adopt an e-commerce. So as an industry, it's not one that there were a lot of tech brands in, right? Domino's being set up as the delivery leader in the space, I think, lent itself to recognizing the importance of digital early on, because really, where the customer expectation has gone is I click a button, it shows up at my door. I click a button, it shows up at my door. And Domino's, as a brand, we had to recognize that way before 2020, right? Because if you're a delivery brand, you have to recognize that. And for Domino's, it's a little different, because show up at my door, that's not tomorrow. That's within the next hour, half hour, right? Early, less than that if things are going right. And so I think it was just a recognition of what was happening in so many other spaces in terms of click and receive and that instant gratification, right? We recognized that early. We were early adopters with tech. And we were, we're a franchise organization, so that comes with its complexities. But we were able to prove to the franchisees the power of that very early on. And we just ran with it from there and really focused on how can we be there whenever somebody wants to order pizza, the way they want to order pizza. So whether it's a click or something else, how can we be there? And how can we make that experience as smooth as possible by coming up with technologies that solve real problems for them? And, I think that 2020 accelerated that for sure, but especially in the restaurant industry, where it was relatively low e-commerce adoption. You flip a switch and there's no choice, right? You have to have that technology framework to be successful. And so that means a lot of adoption quickly from a lot of our competition. It also means a lot of new competitors and a lot of development in the space very quickly for us. But we sort of have our pencil sharpened and a good idea of what to focus on. And we're certainly keeping ourselves sharp to be the best solution for folks right now.
That's great. That's great. So that's an interesting point around the competition, right? That you were there for consumers already at the click of a button and delivering at their doorsteps. But now there's many other competitors that were forced, or new competitors came as a result of 2020. So that's great. So we have great product. We have ease of use for consumers, right? How about around what kind of happened with media, right? When we were preparing for this call, we talked about kind of, what was media like years ago at Domino's, right? And then we'll kind of move forward and how that's progressed. But let's talk about what was Domino's approach, years back when it came to media.
Yeah, I think, just around that same theme of being transparent about problems and always trying to innovate, years back, sort of the progress happening in the background at Domino's, very DR focused, direct response, but not very incrementality focused. So really looking at the orders driven by ads, but sort of a question looming in everybody's minds. Well, what if they would have ordered anyway? Are we still counting that? And, the answer was that actually has a really big impact on your read on effectiveness, that a lot of those folks are ordering anyway. I think that happens a lot across many different industries, just from my agency experience as well. And it's a really important thing to account for within your approach. And so there's sort of that one question, and then that's linked to a lot of different issues that are out there in the industry. Fraud being a prevalent one that is getting lessened each year. But banner blindness, oversaturation of frequency, these types of things we feel like shifting to an incremental approach has really helped us navigate these things, because it can give us a true read on what's effective and what's not. And so we will avoid some of the pitfalls of the industry as we sort of innovate in that. And so we've built an in-house media team to be able to navigate the space. We're really focused on incrementality in our approach. We really focus our conversations with our partners on how do we prove that incrementality? They might not have tools built today that help us do that, but we're willing to work with them to get there. Because to me, that's the new negotiation, right, for digital. So much is bought in auction marketplaces now. And so it's not as much about price, it's about how are we going to prove the impact? What data views are you going to give me so that we as an organization can trust everything that we're seeing here? I mentioned we're a franchise org, and that sort of resonates with me really specifically in a way that, I'm viewing it as I'm spending their money when I'm buying their media, right? So it's really important to me that we're setting up the right partnerships, proving the value, making the right investments on their behalf. And so that has meant negotiation less on price at this point, because the marketplace sort of takes care of that, and more on proving incrementality and all the different data views that might uncover the strategies that lead to higher levels of incrementality.
That's great. So it's what's fascinating there is it's almost the Domino's approach is almost the opposite of the way a lot of companies and brand marketers have shifted this year, right? Because for a lot of companies, they've naturally have shifted more towards lower cost, direct response, right? Where what you're saying, what sounds to me is you've actually moved away from that. That was the old way for Domino's, right? And now it's more about, hey, it's not about necessarily price, it's about incrementality, like you said. What's your advice to folks that are watching right now? Like, how do you make that shift, right? Because it's a tug of war with the CFO, obviously, right? And if you're public with expectations there, like how do you actually approach that? How do you convince people internally? How do you start to move towards that direction? Like, what are the first few things you would suggest?
I sort of put it in context to the statement I made earlier about technology growing at Domino's and how we had to convince a franchise organization to do that by getting key wins and showing them the power of that technology. The same is true of any executive team when you're trying to shift to a digital approach or a measurement approach. And so big thing for us was to find that opportunity for some key wins. Where are the partners that were really going to help us shine? Where are the partners that we felt had the most incrementality? Domino's is also sort of, prior to the DR focus, very focused on TV investment, right? And so that's sort of every QSR is very focused on high reach TV investment. And so MMMs have always been in our sort of, business approach. MMMs help because they give us a really good comprehensive understanding of media. I think a piece of this is to sort of recalibrate people so that they understand there is no one set of data that tells us everything. And MMMs tell us that comprehensive view of value, but incrementality helps us know what's the right way to tactically approach the market. What should our target be? What should our message be? What should our placement be? What should our bid and buy strategy be? Reach, frequency, balance. All of those things can't really be answered by MMM. It also means sort of recalibrating folks again to think, well, there isn't one thing that tells me exactly what's going on. So these DR metrics that are telling me that there is a $25 return on investment, like every dollar I spend, I get $25 back. Right. If you're a shrewd finance person, did you believe that investment was truly that level, or did you have that question in your mind the whole time and you just hadn't brought it up yet? And we were lucky to have really good partners on our side that sort of got it right away, that we were setting a higher standard for our media than anybody else in the industry would be. And that, we cared just as much as they did about the financials, and we were gonna find the ways that drove the most sales for the business at the end of the day.
That's great. So basically, you taking the opposite approach, well, a blended approach, right? Away from what a lot of folks have been doing during 2020, and obviously it's working really well for Domino's. What and obviously measurement is a part of that, and you mentioned that around incrementality. A big part, whether it's direct response or incrementality, a few things that could potentially go into that, right, are cookies and mobile device identifiers, right? And here you already have, Firefox and Safari. There's no third-party cookies, right? Google's announced that Chrome will sunset its third-party cookies sometime soon. And then you have Apple announcing, although delayed, right? It was supposed to happen during Q4. It's delaying it till some point in early 2021. The sunset, well, not the sunsetting, but changing the way IDFAs are utilized, right? Where consumers are opted in. So that's going to make things, I'm assuming, more complicated for Domino's. How do you think about approaching that, and what are your plans?
It's definitely more complicated. I think, so much of the digital world has come down to an understanding of the individual. And with cookies in general, again, did we ever really understand a cookie ID to be an individual? Did we ever believe that? And a cookie ID, how many cookie IDs are associated to Mark Messing right now? I have no idea, but it's not one. And that proliferation matters a lot, even if it's just 2 or 3. When you're talking about reach frequency balance, that could be a 2-fold or 3-fold on my investment that I don't need to be doing, right? So cookies in general, have had their issues from the beginning. And we have been focused on partners that have a really firm understanding of the individual as a piece of our journey in incrementality. I think you can do incrementality a lot of different ways, but the way we approach it is at an individual level. And so we focus on partners that have a really good understanding of the individual. Mm-hmm. And that might mean partners that have authenticated logged in user bases. It might mean partners that have really good deterministic models. And I think increasingly it's going to mean partners that have really good probabilistic models instead of deterministic models because of the implications of iOS 14. And when I talk about deterministic and probabilistic, that's just the models they use to string together all of those cookie IDs and device IDs that are under Mark Messing's name to try and figure out that it is all under Mark Messing, right? And so again, that's where a lot of the conversations, because we're not spending our time talking about price anymore, right? A lot of conversations might turn to what's your probabilistic model? What's your approach? What are some specifics? And there's sort of a little bit of a dance that happens there because people don't want to uncover all of those details. Companies don't always want to uncover all of those details. So then it might be, so what are data views you can show me to help me understand what is going on here, right? And so that's, I think we're well set up because our focus on incrementality has led us to stronger forms of individual level IDs where possible. We've been having these types of conversations for a while, but I think those are the conversations you need to be having with your partners as you figure out how to handle your media approach with iOS 14.
That makes a lot of sense. I think you're going to find a lot of folks are going to be surprised when these changes do happen, assuming they do move forward, because for a lot of folks, they're still doing what you mentioned Domino's used to be doing, right? Buying, let's say whether it's programmatically or at scale, trying to buy inexpensively and just measuring for direct response, where, that I think is going to hit a lot of people very quickly if they're not prepared, to your point, in 2021. Because if you can't measure, now all of a sudden, well, if you're spending, does that make sense? So awesome. Let's talk about the fun part. The fun part right? We talked about targeting and measurement, and that's obviously, it's probably even more important. But one thing I think everyone always forgets about, right, Mark, is creative, right? And the actual campaigns, right? To me, I don't know what the data is, but in my gut, it's at least worth somewhere between 50 to 75% of the value of the campaign, right? So, and that's why, like you said, so many people probably continue to do TV, and now you could obviously do video and a lot of other formats and different screens. So take us through a few examples. I mean, when we talked, right, we talked about points for pies, we talked about delivery insurance, and all these other campaigns that you ran. Like, can you give a couple examples of ones that you ran that you're really proud of, that you think were fun and worked well?
Oh, definitely. Domino's has been pretty good on the creative front. I've learned a ton there on this front, and I'm proud to have been involved in the campaigns I've been involved in, because we shake things up a little bit. We have like this mentality. We call it the "oh yes we did" mentality. So the idea is, if somebody asks, "Did you just do that?" You just say, "Yeah, oh yeah, we did." So the campaigns I'm proud of. Points for Pies was one. I was the director of our loyalty program at the time, and what the promotion was you could get points, for eating pizza from anywhere. Could be frozen pizza. It could be, your local shop down the corner. It could be Pizza Hut. It could be anywhere. You could get points for that to Domino's, right? And the thinking there was, we wanted to celebrate people's love for pizza, and we wanted people to get points for loving pizza. And so we put out this promotion. We actually had our CEO in the ad, Rich Allison. It was his first national TV commercial, and he was in a pizza restaurant that was not a Domino's Pizza, talking about pizza that was not Domino's Pizza. And so the idea was, we built a scanner into our app that had artificial intelligence. You could use that artificial intelligence to scan pizza. If you scanned pizza, you got points. And so I was really proud of that one. I was also part of delivery insurance. So delivery insurance was sort of this idea that we recognize not every delivery is going to go right. We, despite our best efforts, and we really are sort of manically obsessed with every delivery going right, but they don't always do that. So in that event, we want to make it easier for you to make it right than it currently is. And so we established delivery insurance program. And so that was one so those are the two more recent ones that I've been sort of primarily involved in. And I think you're right that creative has such a big impact on media's value. And it's so interesting too, the difference between what can work depending the channel you're on, and I think you really have to recognize, when you go digitally with some of this stuff, the amount of attention that a digital ad gets. And again, you just have to be honest with yourself about this stuff, because that's the situation, right? If an ad is getting 1 to 3 seconds of attention, like, how are you going to have an impact? And it's possible to have an impact in that amount of time. And an interesting example of that is, when we launched our new specialty pizzas. So a big piece of our response to strategically our response to the quarantining was to launch cheeseburger pizzas and chicken taco pizzas. And a quick plug, if you haven't tried them, order them, because they are good. And especially the chicken taco on thin crust, it's like nachos that are easy to eat. So definitely good.
Not as messy, right? Yeah.
Right. Not as messy. It works well for delivery, which is sort of the point. The idea is, we're going to let you eat these things but the delivery is still going to be quality, right? Because when you get a burger or a taco delivered, it ends up not going so well a lot of the time in terms of the food quality. So a piece of what we did, we have a pretty standard practice of posting, just really good fan shots of, people that take pictures of our pizza because our pizza just looks good as a picture, right? And so we have a standard practice of that. And for specialty pizzas, what we did was we sort of posted a little video that glitched out and turned into a hamburger and then glitched back. We did that same thing with tacos, and then we promoted those as ads. So like that's very different than what that national TV message is. The national TV message is a 30-second to tell. How do you tell that same story in 3 seconds, right? It's in some ways it's a more fun creative challenge. As someone who started in paid search, like where you don't have more than 100 characters to say what you're trying to say, like I like that challenge of like, okay, but how do we make this come to life in 3 seconds? You know, because that's what you really need to do in a lot of these spaces. And so it's definitely those are some of the ones that really stand out in my mind. But there's been so many really big examples at Domino's of those campaigns that sort of stand in people's minds. Paving for pizza, for whatever reason, everybody at every party I was at came up to me and, are you really doing this? Are you really fixing potholes? And, oh yeah, we did, you know? Oh yeah. So.
Well, I have a feeling that you're going to have a lot of incrementality when it comes to chicken taco pizzas today. So if you blip on the radar this evening, you'll know maybe it came
there
from.
You go.
Right?
Gotta try it. Telling you, gotta try it.
I will be one of those incremental flyers this evening. So that's great. That's great. I mean, one thing I will say on the creative side that we've seen at Mobilefus that I know you would love, because this could work for any industry. We've seen, like, whether it's, you know, let's say if it's for makeup, being able to actually change the, you know, different color lipsticks interactively, you know, on your mobile device, which everyone has, right? You could do, you know, change your pizza toppings, right? Interactively on your device. You could change the colors of your wall, right? You know, if you're looking to, you know, redo your, you know, maybe your living room because you're spending a lot more time there, or virtually, you know, pick out a new SUV, you know, make, model, and color, and see how it looks on your driveway virtually, right? Like there's a lot of things that you can do creatively, to your point. And it's like, and to be able to take those 1 to 3 seconds, right? And, you know, move it to a longer period of time so that you have that engagement. So,
and I think what you're talking about is so important in terms of trying to keep people engaged in the space they're in too. Because I do think there's a little bit of a mentality sometimes of like, I'm kind of doing what I'm doing. I don't want to go off to do this other thing, right? And so like keeping people engaged where they can look through products and colors of things and start to play around with it in the space they're in, and it becomes a part of the initial thing they set out to do, I think is really important, you know?
And it just goes to the, you know, Domino's is all about customer service, right? And putting the customer first, right? You talked about that product and ease of use. Then it's, hey, I think you're seeing a shift across the media landscape to think about also consumers, you know, what their experience is with the media as well, right? Point. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So you talked about points for pies. A really hot topic that I've come across. I've hosted roundtables around this as well. I've actually have connected former, you know, Starbucks loyalty program managers with folks at Dunkin'. That, you know, that's been a big thing this year. Is like, hey, wait, we need to also jumpstart not only our, you know, how we're, you know, ease of use for customers, but also give them more reasons to come back. And loyalty programs has been a, you know, a big hot topic. And for some people, they love it. They're having a lot of success. Others think it's just eating into the margins. Like, so can you talk a little bit about the Piece of the Pie rewards program? You know, give a little history on it, how it's evolved, where, and how that's doing.
Yeah, thanks. So Piece of the Pie rewards, Domino's loyalty program. Every 6 orders that you place over $10, you get a free pizza. Very basic value equation, right? And so that's the basic program. And then we do a bunch of cool targeted stuff off to the side in the background and against groups and things like that. Largest loyalty program in restaurants. So very, very high active member base. People love pizza. People love Domino's. And so I think getting a free pizza every 6 certainly works out. I ran the program. I was the director of loyalty for a bit, one of my stops while at Domino's. And I loved it because I'm a board game guy. And, to me, it like just played to that nature. Like, okay, it's like creating your own board game. What's the incentive structure you're going to make here to increase your business, right? And I think the problem when people are sort of looking at loyalty and it's eating into their profits, it's because they set the wrong incentive structure based on their needs, right? They didn't recognize the category. They didn't recognize how it worked. Ours very clearly aimed at driving purchase frequency for us, right? And just in the structure. And there's so many side things you can do on top of that. You talk about Starbucks. Starbucks has a really cool feature in their app where there's sort of a very targeted experience trying to get you to order slightly more than your current ordering behavior for whatever it is you already like to order. Or they are trying to get you to order something you've never ordered before, and they're giving you all these bonus points for that stuff, right?
Right.
That's all about incrementality. It's all about like figuring out how to get someone to do something they wouldn't otherwise have done. And I do think there's a point with certain loyalty structures where you have to like take a step back and reassess, because you get the incrementality you were going to get, and now they're at this level, and how do you ramp it up? How do you get to that next place? And so we're sort of constantly keeping an eye on that, trying to do new and interesting things at Domino's. But yeah, that's sort of overview of Piece of the Pie rewards. If you're not a part of it, you should be, because you get that base value, but there's a ton of like email offers and stuff that are targeted to folks for specific reasons. And that same like camp as the Starbucks stuff I just discussed, that, is worth it. And so I would really recommend joining the program if you haven't. But from a business perspective, definitely loved that role. Like, just like I like Settlers of Catan and, those types of things. So
it's funny. I think I'm always going to laugh now whenever I hear the word incrementality. I'm going to think about tacos. So just
there you go.
So we have 10 minutes left, and we have a lot of Q&A questions. So either I did a really bad job asking questions, or we have so much interest. I think it's the latter, based on these, that we actually have a lot of interest in what you had to say. So one of the first questions was, Mark, so when you have a program that does say well digitally or on TV or wherever it is, how do you take that win, that increment, when you win that incrementality, how do you potentially? Oh, somehow I got muted for a second. Can you hear me now, Mark?
I can, yeah.
So when you have success, I'll repeat it. When you have success in one channel, right? So if you have a lot of success with TV, is there any approach, or how do you internally take that win and try to make it work potentially in another channel, right? Because there's so many times where, because it works in TV, it doesn't mean it's going to work on a mobile device, right? But is there any approach or any process that you guys put to that?
I would say, like, a big thing we do is creating test frameworks for each channel. And so once you sort of get a really key learning, if it's something that's really disruptive for us, we might test it again, or even test it a third time. Like if it's just like, something really counterintuitive, or you have a lot of data suggesting something else. But every once in a while, that stuff is still true. And even if it's email or text or something like that, even if it's a small channel, can have really big implications in terms of your marketing strategy, your messaging strategy. But for us, we have basically test lanes for every channel that we do. Even the way we come up with our TV creative, there's a specific testing approach to that. And it's really just, making sure we're talking across channels so that, we can take an insight that might be captured, and then say, okay, well, let's try that in this test lane now. Let's try and test that over here and see if it works. And then if it starts just catching on in a lot of test lanes, you say, wow, this is working everywhere. Like, let's just thread this together and launch it, So that's, I'd say, roughly the approach. Like, for us, each sort of channel has its own test lane and its own really, I think, sincere approach at driving as much value as possible. And it's about communicating with each other across teams to make sure what are you guys learning? What are you guys seeing? And our A/B testing team on the website, what are you guys seeing? Because there might be something there that pops up that we can use on the digital marketing side. And that happens all the time, where we come up with a learning here and move it over to a different lane. And then they validate it using their approach as well.
That's great. That's great. So, one of the questions here is, this is great. This is going back to the creative discussion. What is Domino's hasn't done that Mark really wants to do? Is there anything out there that you might feel a little handcuffed on, and or you'll take the fifth?
There's a few ideas that might have got cut at the draft table, but I think that's fine. Not every idea needs to get pushed out there, and overall, I would say they're really we have a good processes for really finding those things that the customers want, right? They're going to resonate with the customers, and so there's been a few things I've wanted to do that maybe our customers didn't want, and then you got to let them go. I'm not going to get specific, but yeah, that'd be my answer to that.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting one. What's any insights on Gen Z and trying to reach that audience? Right, it's definitely a different group. Do you have any suggestions or learnings that you could share?
That's an interesting one. I think there's clearly some platforms that are more capturing that younger audience that you can explore, right? That are just really well known for having younger audiences. TikTok, Snapchat, really well known for having those younger demographics. Something that tends to, be important with Gen Z is to figure out how their behaviors and expectations might be different. Whereas, I click it and it comes to my doorstep was sort of like a theoretical aspiration for, people at one point. That's just the expectation, and for the younger generations. And so I think sort of recognizing just the fact that they're used to a world where content is coming in really small bites, and it's not going to take a lot of and they're going from one bite to one bite to one, and they're a multi-device world, and that there is a strong desire for that instant gratification, I think is important as you design solutions there. The reality is we're all becoming like that because, and it's funny, you always hear parents like, complain that the kids are always on the phone or what have you. And you sort of want to, sometimes with my siblings, I want to ask, do you realize you do the same thing? Like you don't always realize that, but we're all turning into that, right? We're all needing to consume content in little bites, and our attention span's going down, have this expectation that to get it straight to my door. All of that is, I think, building in the whole population. I think it's especially true for that generation because it's always been true. It's just the way it is. It'd be like, if you went to a store and they didn't have the heat turned on, like in the winter, like that's just what you do, right? And so I think recognizing what is expectation versus aspiration is important too.
That's great. That's great. This next question here, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So you could take the fifth. So clearly, you give this impression, and I know your team is this way. You obviously are thinking about trying to always think outside of the box, right? That's the whole chicken taco theory, right? Incrementality.
Right.
Is there so obviously people and being able to think differently is really important. But is there any technologies that you really feel like are necessary ones, right? Like, so there's obviously certain DSPs that folks might use, or certain vendors they might use, or certain, you mentioned viewability early on. Like, is there any tools where you feel like, hey, this is maybe a tool that everyone should be using, and you're okay with sharing that, or anything that comes to mind?
It's hard to say here's one tool. I would say if you should be working on centralizing your data and figuring out how to activate that data across channels. Even the most sophisticated programs in the world are still figuring out how to get that absolutely right. But it opens up a whole new world in terms of the way that you market. So you can do that through your own database work. You can do that through a DSP. You can do that through a DMP. Depending on exactly how you decide to structure your tech stack. I think that part is really important for sure. Beyond that, I would say that there isn't really anything in particular that stands out from a tech side that you would absolutely need to have. I think it would depend on the situation and what you're looking for.
Right. We've seen, across all different sectors, you kind of take the different segments, right? It's here are my loyal customers, and what's my messaging,
right?
Right. Who do I want to conquest, right? Who do I want to of competitors, right? And then it's a different messaging around there. So that totally makes sense.
Absolutely. There's so many ways if you just think about the ways that people buy your product, the types of people that buy your product, all the ways you can split that data. There are hundreds of ways just in your own customer data of things for you to figure out in terms of the right way to approach that. And so there's a lot just with that. And then once you sort of link that to some of the other data sources out there to figure out, when you pin other attributes that you don't necessarily have in-house, and you start to figure out, what types of folks are index high on having a propensity to buy what you're buying. That becomes important too. I think most people are building that kind of structure with their digital media programs right now, if they can be.
I think I think that's the time, Mark. That was great. I see Marcus is back, and so Mark, it's been great. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for your time. I know this was very helpful for a lot of folks. So.
Thanks for your time, Ken. I feel like, we're the dynamic duo. It's Ken and Mark now. Forever solidified in time. Pizza heroes.
You are the two dynamic pizza heroes. Just a shame you didn't come in uniform or in your capes. But that was such a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much. I cannot not say this, because if there's one thing we should all take out of this, Mark, it's incrementality. That's you've definitely sort of rammed that point home. But I think you're so right, and I'm sure, because in fact I've seen some of the comments and messages, but it's really interesting that you've sort of put across this notion that price is not the core focus, because you're putting trust in, I guess, the auction, as you said, to quote you, to get the price right, and therefore the negotiation is around proving the incremental value that the process, I guess, is bringing to Domino's and to the business. And I think that's really interesting for everyone to think about, especially, I guess, if they want to work with you. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day. So for the rest of the team still on the call, we've got 2 great sessions ahead of us. Just from the Brand Innovators team, we just wanted to remind you that you can actually you can still share the link now with friends and colleagues and get them to tune in, which is quite a good segue actually for the next session, because we're now going to be we've got our sound, we've got our pizza, so now we need to make sure we invite our friends and encourage people to come. And we could potentially do that, if we had a little bit more time, with a cool process that Cameo have introduced. So we could all personalize a message from Ice Cube or Ice-T, who I've noticed is $150 cheaper than Ice Cube. I'm not sure what he'd think about that, but perhaps we'll use him. But we're joined now by Mike Hondor, who joined Cameo, I think just recently in September, as Director of Business Marketing and Brand Partnerships. Previously was just came away from being CMO of Whaler. And Mike, I think I'm right in saying that your focus is on expanding Cameo's brand partnership business, which in the past few months has included clients like Diageo, American Express, Activision, and Kool-Aid. So it seems like you're making a massive impact already. And Mike, you're chatting to Brand Innovators Entertainment Marketing consultant Andrew Hamp about how the app has achieved triple-digit growth this year. So congratulations, and thank you very much for being here, both of you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Hi, Mike.
Hey there.
Loaded question. How are you today, given such a stressful week?
Every breath at a time, one breath at a time, hanging in there. Hopefully, we can say the same for you.
Yes, right there with you. Being cautiously optimistic as the hours chip by. Well, as Marcus said, Cameo has certainly brought some much needed levity into my life this quarantine, and many others as well. So tell us about what attracted you about joining the team, as Marcus said, just a few short months ago, and the growth trajectory that Cameo has been on in 2020 as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks everybody for tuning in. So maybe it would help first to set a little context for anyone not familiar with Cameo. Cameo is the app and site on which you can book celebrity shout outs for yourself, for your friends. You could get Snoop Dogg to wish your mom a happy birthday. You could get a Real Housewife to give your daughter a pep talk before school, and everything in between. So I think the very nature of like the connections that Cameo drives and the experience that fans have as a result, and also talent, was just super appealing to me. And I know, as Marcus mentioned, during COVID alone, we've seen our business grow by about 500%. So as with many things, whether it's entire industries or technologies or consumer behavior, COVID has been a massive accelerant for our business. And I think that just speaks to the level of connection people are seeking in a time where they can't really have what they expect. And especially when celebrities come in, we deliver something that was previously impossible. And I think it's just the joy and the reaction and what we actually call magical moments at Cameo. That's what keeps us all here. And fun facts, and then I'll stop talking, is each week we have an all hands as a team, and we watch together about 175, 200 cameos, the reaction video of the week. And that means watching someone actually receive that cameo from the talent they know and love. And without fail, 100% of cameos elicit some sort of reaction that's just magical. And I think that idea is what really drew me to the company, and it's definitely proven to be amazing thus far.
Now, before you joined the team, what had you received a cameo of your own, and if so, from who?
So I have a couple stories on that one. One, there's a female comedian named Fortune Feimster. My husband and I love her, and she actually does a bit on Instagram where she plays a character named Brenda. She's from the South, as is Fortune Feimster. It's really pretty hilarious. And so we got a cameo from her, which was pretty amazing and super cool. And then actually when I joined the Cameo team, as is the custom, you're welcomed with a cameo. And I went to University of Michigan, huge football, basketball fan back in the day. And I had one of the Fab Five give me a welcome to Cameo experience, which for me was just super cool.
Okay, those are both really great. I'll share my most recent one that I've given, which was for my husband's birthday in July, from Brandi Glanville of the Beverly Hills Housewives. She had a hilarious, profane, very tea-spilling birthday note to share. So much needed joy in my household as well. So
the housewives tend to bring it every time.
Yeah. Well, I had a question about that because I'm sure you guys get asked all the time as far as like who sets the prices, right? Like, I think if you could help clear that up, because one thing I noticed is that even in the week after I booked that Brandy Glanville cameo, her rate went up. So is this the talent setting the rates? Do you guys set it? Is it a mix of both? What kind of determines some of that stuff?
That's a great question. It's actually 100% the talent. So the business model at Cameo is super transparent. If you book a cameo for, let's say, $100, 75 of those dollars go to the talent, 25 go to Cameo. But yeah, to very simply answer your question, the talent name their price. It could be $0, it could be $1,000 or more. And frankly, when you tend to see those price fluctuations, it's often just a direct response of demand. And so we have people on Cameo who spend hours a day simply doing cameos. And to manage that demand, they often kind of change and fluctuate their pricing just to simply meet their own personal time commitments and to be able to actually fulfill what people want and or not, and kind of prevent too much demand from coming. But yeah, talents at their price.
Very, very cool. And thank you for clearing that up. So there's been a couple new ways that have sparked up on the app that are driving that incredible growth you guys have had. Everything from, more, let's say, top tier talent using it for different fundraisers, people using it to raise money for COVID relief, and of course, the work that you've been doing with brands. So let's start with the fundraising element, since we are, of course, still in an election cycle. Talk to me about how you were able to bring A-listers like Mandy Moore, Andy Cohen, Sarah Jessica Parker, and many more to the platform this year to help raise money for different causes.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And actually, it's really interesting. So Cameo, we have about 40,000 talent today, and we have massive goals to vastly exceed that in the future. And so I think if I were sitting here in another year from now, that number would be drastically different. But all that said, I would say we have talent from tier A to tier D and everything in between. And as our CEO, Steven, likes to say, somebody's tier D is someone else's tier A. And so we try to have talent that appeal to everybody. And as we expand globally, we think that footprint will only expand. But so on the note of talent, we tend to see more of the kind of tier A, big halo talent that come onto Cameo. They really want to do it for a cause. So they're not coming to earn money. They likely haven't been affected as much by COVID. If they're an actor, perhaps their production hasn't slowed as much as some others. If they're a singer, an athlete, you name it. So a lot of the talent, like you mentioned, Sarah Jessica Parker, Andy Cohen, Kristen Bell, Mandy Moore, Drew Brees, who just came on, they do it solely for fundraising efforts. And so Drew Brees, for example, is doing it for his personal foundation. Mandy Moore did it for No Kid Hungry. Sarah Jessica Parker, Andy Cohen have raised money for a variety of things, but most recently the Joe Biden campaign, which is a really cool partnership we did with Act Blue. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge lever that I think notable talent really find important if they're to come onto the Cameo experience. And then what's really interesting is, regardless of if they keep doing it for fundraising or charitable causes or not, they find the experience on Cameo to be so positive. And I think there's often kind of misperceptions or misconceptions about what the Cameo experience is. Has-beens trying to make a quick buck, and certainly there may be some of those on Cameo. But tier A talent just find it to be an incredibly amazing platform on which they can connect with people on a real personal level. And so it's really interesting to see those stories kind of unfold across all levels of the talent on Cameo.
Absolutely. Tell me about some other COVID-19 relief efforts that have sparked from this activity as well.
Yeah, so in the spring, we did a really cool thing called Cameo Cares, which was all a 3-day kind of almost Coachella-like experience where talent would come on, and we raised just shy of $750,000 for COVID relief over the course of those 3 days. And again, amazing incentive to get talent to really participate on a platform where fans are just dying to experience one-on-one interactions or even one-to-many interactions in a really intimate way. And when it's for a cause, that's just the icing on top. And so, yeah, we've done COVID Cares. We've done things with Joe Biden. We've done things with the RNC. We've raised over $300,000 for the likes of NAACP, the Trevor Project, Red. We're doing another integration with Red around World AIDS Day on December 1. So it's full steam ahead in terms of charitable components. But we're also really hard at work in terms of starting to work with more and more brands. So it's having just attended the last session, I would love to meet with Mark and say, what would you do on Cameo? This is an amazing place where your fans, your consumers are spending a bunch of time and interacting with talent that are incredibly influential. As a marketer, how would you leverage this platform to tell the Domino story? Or asking similarly, Jorma from Bose, what would you do to connect with consumers in a new way on a platform like Cameo? And we're just at the beginning of writing that story, and it's super exciting.
Tell me about some of those stories. So it sounds like you guys have already have what, a dozen or so case studies under your belt with some blue chip brands. I understand there was one around Cinco de Mayo with Don Julio. Want to tell us about how that came about? I know this was before your time, but
yeah, no, it's amazing. And it's one that we hold up as a great example of what could be done. And it was an integrated campaign across multiple channels, but the Cameo component tapped directly into the idea of the campaign, which was called It's Cinco Somewhere. And so Don Julio, which was one of the many Diageo brands, really tapped into the insight that people were craving connection, human connection during COVID. And this was near the beginning of COVID, right? So early May. And the Zoom happy hours were trending. And so they tapped right into that. And what we did was pair a bunch of celebrities with professional cocktail and mixologists. And we surprised and delighted consumers at scale with these personal kind of cocktail parties and cocktail making experiences. So whether it was like Olivia Culpo paired with a New York City bartender, and they had an amazing mixology session, all featuring Don Julio, it was a huge awareness driver for them. And for the first time, they achieved #1 when it came to share of voice amongst their competitive set. And obviously Cinco de Mayo is a big holiday for the tequila market. So it was super exciting. It was really rewarding for the talent, but also amazingly exciting for the fans that got to experience these cocktail classes and live kind of virtual events and see celebs they knew and loved pop in as a total surprise. So kind of ticked a bunch of great boxes in terms of making sure consumers were excited and had some sort of response. I mean, the sales we drove on Drizzly as a result beat any benchmarks and KPIs that they had set. So like across the board, it was really fun activation. But we've done smaller scale ones, we've done bigger scale ones. And again, we're just super excited to start partnering with brands to bring experiences to life within Cameo and also outside of it, leveraging the power that we have to like drive these connections. Which before Cameo just really weren't that easy.
That's right.
So yeah.
That I love that story. So another way that you've worked with brands, since talent booking is of course your bread and butter, is that you've been able to find brands who of course have recognizable talent of their own. Tell me about some of the campaigns you've done with Kool-Aid or even Activision around their Call of Duty game.
Yeah, so that's a great one. And I think it's a really interesting one, specifically in the entertainment vertical. So think Netflix, think HBO. What would it look like to have the whole cast of every show come on for a launch and really build out an amazing integrated program on and off Cameo? But some really interesting ones. There's actually been 3 that I can think of to date where we've onboarded talent in either an animated or virtual sense or real sense. So the first was Call of Duty, the video game. We brought Captain Price on as bookable talent onto Cameo. His bookings were through the roof within the first few minutes of him being on the platform. And then they leveraged a lot of those experience, a lot of that content across a bunch of social and digital marketing efforts to really build out a really cool experience around the Call of Duty brand. We had the Grinch on last holiday season, which was incredibly exciting. And last summer, fall for National Kool-Aid Day, which I've since learned is a thing, we had the Kool-Aid Man come through. So if you're a child of the 80s or 90s, you probably remember the Kool-Aid Oh Yeah campaign, busting through walls. You could book the Kool-Aid Man on Cameo, but we also did a really cool integration with a bunch of musical artists who came on to basically recreate the Kool-Aid jingle. And so they were bookable and created cameos that kind of brought that Kool-Aid experience, the Kool-Aid jingle to life. And you diced and sliced it and kind of created really cool digital content as a result. So many more possibilities there, whether it's real, animated, digital, Santa's on Cameo, lots of things that we can do when brands bring their own talent to the equation as well.
Absolutely. Quick reminder to those of you tuning in, if you have any questions for Mike toward the end of this Q&A, I'll be asking them in about 10 minutes or so. Just drop them in the Q&A function on the Cisco app. Okay, so Mike, let's talk about a little bit what's next, because obviously the on-demand version of your business is what's driving all that growth. Is there a solution coming perhaps for a live version at some point? What can you tell us as far as the future of Cameo?
Yeah, so there's a lot in the works, and I'll basically preface with saying, to me right now, I think there's a massive opportunity to make Cameo a more personalized experience. So for those of you familiar with Cameo, we've obviously told you what it is, but if you were to go to cameo.com or open up the app today, you'll see virtually what I will see. And are there levers and tools and products that we can build to create a more customized and personalized experience to make the experience on Cameo more sticky? So it's less of a transactional platform and more of a place where you can go repeatedly to see what's happening with the talent you look up to, who's recently joined, how you can interact with them in new ways. So yeah, today a Cameo is kind of what you can book, right? And you get that personalized shout out or you gift it. 80 to 90% of Cameos are gifts. We have an upcoming product in alpha, nearly beta stage called Cameo Calls. And this is our first product that really makes a live experience come to life. So versus receiving a pre-recorded Cameo for you, you can now opt in to join a live Cameo call with a talent. So let's say, Andrew, you're a famous house husband of Beverly Hills, and you say, hey, I'm going live on Cameo. All of your fans go to Cameo, they join your call. They're put into a queue where it shows their place in line, and they wait for their 2 minutes of FaceTime with you. So it's basically a real-time virtual FaceTime experience within the Cameo ecosystem. At the end of it, there's a countdown. You have a selfie with your talent that's branded Cameo Calls, automatically downloads to your phone, and on goes the celeb to the next 2 minutes with the next person in line. So I share that saying it's a super new product in alpha, nearly beta stage, but it's a thing that we have received universally positive feedback from both fans and talent. They're like, I cannot believe I just spent 2 minutes with celebrity XYZ. It never could have happened otherwise. And frankly, the celebs love it too. 2 minutes goes by in a flash. And it's fun because for life you'll have this selfie, frankly, this selfie with the talent that you just know and love. That'll be yours for perpetuity. So that's a really cool experience that we're building, and there's so much more to come. There already are live Zoom calls also, which is like a one-to-many experience. So there are some talent that are bookable for whether it's 10, 20, 30-minute slots. You can have up to 10 people in there and have a virtual hangout with these people. This is just the tip of the iceberg of products that we're starting to build to drive that connection even further. And I think this opens up a real opportunity for brands to associate with talent and, frankly, the emotional connection that is driven as the result of these experiences. I think it's going to be really powerful in the future.
Absolutely. So to that point, let's talk about user acquisition. So this year alone, you said you've had what, 1.5 million cameos to date, right? Something like that. So of that 1.5 million, how many of those are organic? I would imagine there's a high conversion rate. Once someone receives a cameo, they probably pay it forward, et cetera. And then how much of that relatively is coming from paid channels?
Yeah, so percentage wise, I actually don't have the exact numbers, but I will say that there are incredibly healthy user acquisition channels on both sides, right? So going on the organic side, every cameo by its very nature is a soon to be viral moment. And whether that viral moment becomes truly viral and like the tens, 20s, hundreds of thousands of views, or simply viral and buzzed about within your inner circle, those, while they're meant for one person, have legs far beyond the recipient for which the cameo was booked. So I said 80 to 90% of our cameos today are GIFs. Nearly 100% of those are shared socially, whether in real time or on people's social channels across Twitter, Instagram, and the like. So the organic acquisition of new Cameo fans, as we refer to them, is incredibly strong. That said, we have really robust programs for user acquisition around paid acquisition on the channels that you would know and expect. So Instagram is super powerful for us. I'm excited to see where TikTok leads. Snapchat is really exciting, but yes, we're a very social company. So social platforms tend to do the heaviest lifting for us when it comes to paid acquisition.
That makes a lot of sense. And tell me a little bit more about the types of talent. So you mentioned Real Housewives for sure. What other categories of talent tend to perform the best? Yeah, so it's performing the best is a really interesting way to put it, because I would say we don't have many categories that don't, but it's all like in the eye of the beholder, right? Like I couldn't tell you who so many of the talent on Cameo are, because I'm not a gamer. I'm not super into YouTube comedy, for example, but we have people who just kill it in those categories. The biggest names on Twitch tend to do really well on Cameo. Reality TV is just a slam dunk for Cameo. I mean, these people are personalities on TV, off TV, like they just kind of shine. But our talent acquisition and talent kind of retention teams here at Cameo are verticalized. So we have efforts around scripted and unscripted TV, film, musicians, athletes, and everything in between. And so again, I think it would be difficult, I think, for anyone, especially in the US, to go on to Cameo today and not find a talent that they know and love. And we just have to do more work to get more and more people to see Cameo as a really, really exciting place to perhaps earn money, or more importantly, perhaps raise funds for a cause or a charity, and to interact with the people who love them the most as a result. And so yeah, I mean, we tend to see across the board, people just kill it. A couple new fun names that joined in the last week. We had Kristen Bell, who raised money for Biden. Drew Brees, as I mentioned, joined. Kenny G, old school saxophone. He's killing it. So, I mean, it just shows you it's so diverse when it comes to the type of people that really do it. And frankly, I think one of the bigger names, and he's been on for a really long time and is a big fan of Cameo, is Snoop Dogg. He's old school Cameo now, and just continues to hit it out of the park, as does Carol Baskin. So it just shows you the diversity. As we mentioned earlier, creating these types of social experiences has been a kind of a through line throughout your career and your various roles, including most recently Whaler. I'm curious, what are some pillars that motivate you as a marketer, like especially now? Like what are a couple guiding principles that you like to abide by?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's actually one that's kind of close to my heart. So it cheesily aligns to Cameo's mission, which is not actually meant to be an answer that is meant to do that. But it's about connection, and it's about connecting with humans on a real level versus a scripted or inauthentic level. So for me, whether it was at Instagram, where I was fortunate enough to be on the team that launched the entire monetization strategy and business at Instagram, or whether it was at Whaler, which is an amazing creative influencer platform, or whether it's now at Cameo, it's the ability to tell stories and connect with humans on a real level. So with Cameo, for example, that means I'm connecting with you via the voice and character or person that you look up to most. In influencer marketing, it means connecting on a super creative and personal level. On Instagram, it means telling you the stories you want to see in a super, super personal place to you, where you're connecting, maybe not so much with friends, but with the things that you care the most about. And so it's personal and human connection, which ultimately data shows drives action, which is really important to remember. And secondly, I think empathic connection is really important. So having empathy as a marketer is something that kind of drives me. It's not creating one size fits all messages. It's creating messages that resonate with people on the level that they need to. And that's definitely a big driver for me. over my career, and I'm really excited to see what we can do with that here at Cameo.
Absolutely. Taking a look at some of the Q&As that are coming in. This is, I think, an appropriate follow-up based on some of the insights you just shared, which is young consumers highly value authenticity. So what makes a brand authentic in 2020? I think maybe going back to even the reaction videos that are at the core kind of capture some of that, but maybe speak to how authenticity plays out on Cameo.
Yeah, I mean, authenticity is one of those buzzwords that's thrown about, I think, far too much, and yet I'm guilty of saying it multiple times, because I think when it's done right, you just know it. Like, it doesn't feel as though you're a recipient of a commercial message. It feels like, wow, this brand knows me, and I hopefully already loved this brand, and if I don't, I'm incentivized to learn more. And so it's not again, one size fits all message that says, hey, I'm celebrity ABC on behalf of Coke, we're launching a new drink. That doesn't feel personal. What feels personal is, hey, Mike in Austin, Texas, I know you're a huge fan of Michigan football, and hey, it's me in someday, Tom Brady, here to say, A, thanks, and B, like, whatever it might be. I'm just like trying to paint the picture of, if it's a personal message that appeals to the things that motivate me, the things that I love most, the people and things that I love, that feels real and that feels authentic. And of course, what's the trick to scale that if it's actually that personal? I think there are ways to do that, especially with talent who have really, really interesting niche audiences around specific topics, specific things. And I think Cameo is going to tap into some of that when it comes to brand partnerships.
Absolutely. Going back to Cameo calls for a second. So would you say it's similar to a Reddit AMA, and what's the difference if so?
So what I think, it's similar in a way that you can have direct connection, right, with a talent or a human. What's different is that it's just super Cameo. So Cameo is not trying to be something that it's not. So it's a very raw, in the moment, on your phone, 2 minutes, that's it kind of experience. So you're not going to go on and on asking multiple questions for multiple minutes with this person with whom you've connected in a Cameo call. You have 2 minutes. And we'll let you know when that time is ending. We'll leave you with an amazing memento that's branded, hopefully in the future with brands. So imagine Cameo calls with Nike or something like that. But it's not meant to be an ongoing conversation. It's meant to be kind of a lighthearted, fun, quick interaction, and just something that can't be replicated because you're actually talking face to face or screen to screen. And I think that's just a really unique experience.
Absolutely. So what hasn't Cameo done yet creatively that you would like to see, or maybe what's an initiative that you're personally working to advance?
Well, so there is no product created. There is no, there is nothing in the works at the moment, but I love to start thinking of ways in which, so we're building all of these tools to create more interaction and more engagement between fans and talent. What are those tools and experiences we can build to drive those interactions between fans and brands? Mm-hmm. So I think Cameo has a huge opportunity ahead of it via talent or via brands to create experiences that just, again, can't happen in this moment and frankly in real life when it gets back to normal again. So what does a meet and greet look like on Cameo? What does a backstage experience look like on Cameo? What does a product drop look like on Cameo? What does a brand look like on Cameo? All these things we can and will answer. And I think that's the exciting part, is we're just at the beginning of this super exciting business we're going to build. And I'm so excited to partner with the brands that are leaning into what could be possible in a new platform, in a creative platform, and in a platform that's just disruptive and innovative by its very DNA. And I think that story remains to be written, but it's certainly the paper's out and the pen's out, and we're starting to kind of script what it might look like.
Absolutely. Another question that just came from the Q&A touches on the fact that brands are, of course, experimenting with all new types of technologies and platforms that they might not have in the quote unquote real world. So maybe going back to a previous role from prior to Cameo, since you're still relatively new to this role, what's an example of a risk that you've taken, whether it's with a brand partner or on behalf of the brand that you were representing at the time, that paid off? What's an experiment that you tried, a new type of partnership or platform that reaped rewards for you?
That's a great question. I mean, I think I'll have an amazing answer to that in another few months around some of the first movers on Cameo. So I'll be excited to hopefully share that story in the future. But frankly, I mean, thinking back to Instagram, like it was really interesting in 2013 and early 2014 when the team was formed that I was so lucky to be a part of that basically launched the Instagram business. We were in rooms with CMOs and incredibly important decision makers asking them if they were on Instagram, and 9 times out of 10, the answer was no. So what we had to do is take our phone out and be like, this is Instagram. This is what it looks and feels like. And this is why your brand should be a part of it. It's new. It's different. It's a place to connect. That's not like Facebook. That's not like Twitter. That's not like digital display or whatever it might be. And so I think the first movers tend to be the big winners and experimenters. Certainly in 2014, brands, as all brands always will want to do, they want to drive conversion, they want to drive action, they want to drive purchase. We didn't have products to do that on Instagram, but we had products to communicate visually with no translation necessary, with global messages through amazing best-in-class mobile content. And like, that's what started an amazing story that, of course, that shift to sales, and Instagram's an incredibly successful business today. But it's marketers that take risks and are eager to be first, just to prove what something could be without needing it to be something it has to be, if that makes sense. So again, like the first brands that started doing Instagram stories, what does that look like? How does it feel? Obviously, again, over half of the time spent on Instagram is on stories now, and that's where brands want to be. But the first brand to do that was a brand that took a big risk, and they're like, is this going to be bad for my brand? Are consumers going to be really annoyed? But when they did it right and they did it well, the answer was no. And it reaped rewards. So those are some examples, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, just last week we had on one of our previous live casts a marketer from Taco Bell who was talking about how she has a dream job because she's able to experiment just strictly on social media, new media, et cetera, with no KPIs attached. I think the more forward-thinking companies that create roles like that are strictly just for the learnings of it, try and fail, all that kind of stuff, I think the more progress we'll make toward advancing innovations.
Taco Bell was one of those first movers on Instagram, and they've always been very, very much lean forward brand, which I appreciate. So hopefully we'll see them on Cameo soon.
Absolutely. They're killing me with killing off the Mexican pizza, though. So
Mark will be happy.
That's right. So my couple more quick questions for you before you wrap. Tell me a little bit more about the audience on Cameo. One would assume it's probably mostly Gen Z and millennials, but are there other, whether it's age brackets, ethnicity brackets, et cetera? Tell me a little bit about what your audience looks like.
Yeah, great question. So today, being a U.S. company based here in the U.S. and with the majority of our talent U.S., we are a pretty strong footprint in the U.S. I think it's between 15 and 20% of cameos are booked outside of the U.S. borders. So again, we have major efforts and teams growing across the globe to expand Cameo's footprint. Including, I literally was just on a call with the head of our UK team, and we brought on a cricketer who is super appealing to the UK audience, but 40% of his bookings are from India. So like that gives you an idea of how we're going to just start expanding our reach. But in general, actually, I would have thought the exact same thing. Joining Cameo, it's super Gen Z, super millennial. Surprisingly, no. Now, that's not to say we don't have a massive footprint of Gen Z and millennials on the platform. We do. But only about 10 to 15% of our users in terms of people who are booking cameos are under the age of 24. So our most prolific segment is actually mid-30s to 50 plus. And I think that's really great because these people, if we're speaking to marketers in the room, these people have disposable income. These people have money to spend. by and large. And they're people who we want to target with our messages. But we also have a really robust millennial and younger crowd. And I think that's only going to grow over time. And so it's really interesting to see how well dispersed our fans are in terms of age brackets. And then in terms of course, geographical diversity, specifically in the US, but also racial diversity, and it's basically 50-50 gender-wise. So hopefully we'll have more really concrete stats to share soon, especially as I grow the business here. But I think we're starting from a really good place in terms of the diversity and the breadth of who Cameo fans are.
Absolutely. Okay, 2 quick questions for you, Mike, before I let you go. As we look ahead to 2021, what is your prediction for, I guess, your overall sector? Like where will social experiences go, Cameo or otherwise? What trends are happening now that will continue to accelerate in the next 12 months?
Oh, that's a good question. And if I were a soothsayer, I would say the more and more, especially now that we're re-entering some sorts of lockdown, whether it's in the US or abroad, the more we can approximate real connection virtually, the better. And so again, face-to-face or screen-to-screen or hand-to-hand experiences are only going to grow. People are dying for community and connection. And I think the places that provide real connection and brand safe connection, when we're talking about brands that don't have a bunch of trolls and kind of people igniting and sparking fires, I think that's where brands are going to move. I mean, we've seen the earnings and growth numbers around the Pinterests of the world. I think that's indicative. That doesn't speak to the face-to-face connection I'm talking about, but it speaks to the kind of safe experiences that I think humans and brands want to be a part of. So yeah, I would say brand safety is huge, and then just connection, and as close to real as we can get, the better. And I think that will just continue.
From your lips, I mean, I really hope we have at least some IRL solution in your head. We're all hoping it. Yeah. All right. Last but not least, you mentioned at the top of our conversation, Mike, the most memorable cameos that you've recently received. What's the best one you've gifted?
Oh, man. Well, this is actually really interesting. So this speaks to the diversity of the talent on the platform and the types of people who really love cameos. So my nephew is 14 years old. He lives in the panhandle of Florida, and he is an avid bass angler. I could not be more different from my nephew. So I went on to Cameo and I was like, what do you get a 14-year-old that's turning, or what do you get a 14-year-old for his birthday who has all the things he would need, but like basically spends 90% of his time fishing? Well, you go on Cameo and you search for a professional bass fisherman, and you find one and you book him. And literally within 30 minutes, he had a personalized message to my nephew, Max, that spoke to the tournament he was fishing in that weekend, the trophy he had won the weekend before, seeing his name in the papers. And it was just magical because I didn't know this guy from Adam, but Max sure did. And the connection that was driven with a simple few keystrokes was like one he'll remember for life. And so again, I think that just shows, like, I don't even know who this guy is, but Max sure did. And everyone has that person that they'll remember for life. And I think that's kind of the power of what Cameo has built.
And to your earlier point, someone's tier D is certainly your nephew's tier A. So that's
Exactly.
That's really remarkable. Well, Mike, I really want to thank you so much for sharing all these great tips and insights with us. And I'll hand it back over to Marcus.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Mike. That was so interesting. And Mike, I think that it's very fortuitous that your personal values match Cameo's values. That's probably good for the interview. So I've definitely taken down connections, empathy, and authentic and personal messaging. So congratulations on your new gig. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and really all the best of luck to you.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. So for our last session of the day, we are going to tune in to Hulu. We're going to be joined by Kendra Upham, who is Hulu's head of media, and Asad Bamla, who is the director of business development at the Trade Desk, someone who I have met before. Guys, are you there? You turn on your cameras and mute yourself, which is something that I struggle to do. Hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
You too. How are you doing?
I'm living the lockdown dream, I guess, having everybody come into my spare bedroom.
Well, beautiful, beautiful bedroom it is, and you've not got the fan going, which is probably a good thing.
As of the moment, so far we're good.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Kendra and Assad are going to give us a fascinating insight into the business, probably the business, arguably, that championed the massive consumer shift we talked about earlier towards online streaming. And guys, I think we're all excited to hear about how you and the team have helped pull consumers into the brand in such massive numbers, and how Hulu's approach and your approach and the team's approach is shifting and evolving. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to hand over to you guys.
Awesome. Marcus, thanks for the warm welcome. And Kendra, super excited to speak to you again. And as Marcus kind of queued us up, Hulu, obviously one of the brands at the forefront of a massive shift in how consumers are consuming content and watching their media, particularly right now with both everything that's going on in the U.S. elections, as well as, COVID and all that kind of stuff. So, Kendra, you've been at Hulu for about 4 years now, and Hulu has been a leader in the streaming space probably since before we were referring to it as the streaming space, right? And this past year certainly feels like a watershed moment. So, Kendra, one of the things that really impressed me when I was, learning about your background was your focus on building a relationship with your consumers through campaigns and orchestrating all the multiple mediums that Hulu works in order to elevate the brand and promote your content. So really excited to hear from you about some of those shifts in media consumption and media buying that your teams are engaging in today, and how that impacts our industry as a whole. So we'll kick off, and maybe we'll start with the topic of like the connected TV or OTT and streaming space, and learn a little bit from you about that. So something I personally heard a lot from marketers this year and content owners is the rapid adoption in this space. So I know a lot of people have said, like, we saw this trend coming. It's been coming for some time, but it feels like 5 years of change has happened in the last 5 months. I'd love to hear from you. How is Hulu in this time of rapid adoption, given the foundation you guys have you been able to embrace that consumer adoption of streaming services, and what does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. First, I wanted to say I'm really excited about Cameo and everything I just learned on that last session. And if anyone wants to send me a Cameo of Slash from Guns N' Roses. But to get back to your question around, how are we moving forward with all the adoption of streaming platforms in our marketing strategy? I mean, definitely the adoption has had a positive impact on Hulu. When you look at our growth again this year, and the amount of hours that have increased with our content, it's been a happy journey for us. Earlier this year, Julie DeTraglia and her team, they put together this behavioral study titled Generation Stream, and it really helps us understand like the attitudes and the motivations of our viewers, who they are, how are they watching TV, and some of that preliminary data that we were able to gather really helps inform, how are we going to market? How are we making modifications to our platform? And some of the interesting findings from my perspective was that, over 91% of streamers would rather give up their music service, their social media, their favorite food, their favorite item of clothing, before they would give up their streaming TV service. I think that says something pretty powerful about, us streamers like Hulu. The other interesting insight that I learned was, about how important personalization was to the Generation Stream. And again, we've taken all of those nuggets to really inform how we're going to go to market, what is the right message that we put into marketplace, and what is the evolution to our product.
Wow, that's amazing, and that especially that first insight is so powerful, right? Like, not to make too much light, but it really is an essential service to have, like, that pipeline of kind of information, entertainment, and content. And sounds a little bit striking when you place it like that, but if you think about it for a moment, it makes a lot of sense. So really, really interesting. So
yeah, and I think now more than ever, right? We need to be with our favorite fandoms, our favorite shows, our favorite actors and actresses to help, keep us comforted.
I'm really interested. I believe it was on a previous Brand Innovators panel, but someone had mentioned, it takes about 8 weeks to create a habit. So I'm really interested. People have come to, come to have this really intimate relationship with services like Hulu that, they are engaging with on a more and more frequent basis. Interested to see how that consumer, adoption holds up over time and continues, because I think that people, now that they're in this habit, there won't be a reverting back to the pre-lockdown behaviors for sure, and in general continue that. With that being said, like Hulu is one of many options that are now available in streaming, and it seems like every month there's a new competitor for mindshare in the space popping up. So I'm curious, how does Hulu think of ways to break through some of that noise with the new competitors out there and the new content being proffered to consumers?
Yeah, great question. It's definitely been interesting the 4 years that I've been watching the space and just watching all the competition come in. And actually, and sadly, some of the competition has, moved away. I think for us at Hulu, it's all about remaining focused, right? We continue to tell our story, leaning into our value propositions. We focus on the experience. We really start with everything around the viewer. It's all about personalization. The viewer, their experience. I mean, I can't stress that enough about how that is our North Star. From a marketing perspective, it's really about highlighting like our award-winning content. We speak about the breadth and depth that's available on Hulu. We highlight the continuous innovation where we're able to connect our viewers with their family and friends, for example. One of our newer features this year was the watch party, and I can't think of a better time for that product feature to actually come to life when many of us are separated from our friends and family. And from a marketing experience, it's all about like choosing partners that really allow us to bring first to market experiences forward. My favorite example right now is with Love Victor, one of our shows that launched a few months ago, where we were able to do a viewing party just prior to the national release, really bringing the story to life within our Shape of History partnership as well with like Courageous Studios. But really at the end of the day, competition drives innovation and we welcome it.
That's fantastic, and I get to see Hulu in kind of two lights, because I work with your teams who are promoting your amazing content, and I get to track like, okay, what are consumers interested in, what are they reacting to? So we support you as an advertiser looking for subscribers, watching for content hand raisers. But the Trade Desk also partners closely with Hulu from an inventory perspective, and over again I hear other folks coming to Hulu interested in the inventory, and what I hear is this trifecta, like you said, the quality of your audiences, the high content quality that provides that premium context that they want to be in, and then of course Hulu is kind of unparalleled in the amount of access that they offer for advertisers to access the data that they apply to those audiences and let them have that first or third party data to action against. So for the Trade Desk, we always see Hulu as having this like amazing trifecta of value that really pops to the top, because we've seen a lot of people be interested in advertising on connected television. For us, Hulu is one of our premium partners, and always every brand wants to be on Hulu content first, and then it's like, okay, let's talk about where else do we advertise in the space. So certainly like that focus on your viewers and the quality of the content, I see it from multiple different angles. It's really neat to witness. Awesome. So with that being said, you mentioned this focus on content, that the focus on viewership and that experience. You guys have been in that game a long time. So I think the numbers I looked up, you have something like 35 million viewers, right? Very, very impressive. But in some ways, Hulu's success makes your job harder, right? Like you're still chasing after the next incremental set of subscribers, the people who aren't Hulu subscribers yet, or maybe they don't have the full Hulu plan. And then you've also got all this awesome content that you're trying to serve up so people know to watch Love Victor and the other stuff that's out there. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that process for you. You know, how does Hulu think about reaching consumers? How do they think about reaching consumers across all the different channels and devices? And how have you adjusted your planning and buying process as, you know, consumers continue to use more devices, more apps, more different services?
Yeah, it comes back to our foundational belief of starting everything with the viewer, right? And we want them to make Hulu a daily habit. We're very cognitive of like how and where we reach our desired audiences, those moments when they're going to be really the most receptive, and even have not only about the receptivity, but like when can they actually take the action that we're striving for. Our approach always like it evolves as consumer behavior changes. For example, if you think about the past 8-9 months, right, consumer behavior has definitely been changing. But at the same time, when I talk about my evolution, it hasn't been anything drastic. My approach has been more refinements and evolutions. So really thinking about, again, as I look at my channel mix and the evolution, you know, it's also equally important for us to think about the messaging. The messaging also has to be adjusted based off of consumer behavior and just what we're seeing out in the marketplace. We want to make sure that we have a really relevant message and very sensitive and aware of what our viewers are experiencing as well. But really, despite like all of that change, the fundamentals are just as important as ever. And that's kind of what keeps us going. Right? We're continuing to use data and insights to inform our strategy. However, maybe where we looked for that data and where we found those insights, they may have evolved over the past 8 to 10 months. There's not a lot of research out there, right, about how to approach consumers during a global pandemic. What's important to them? What do they care about at this moment? Feel our own proprietary research to help guide those decisions and directions. We've become really comfortable with letting the algorithm do its thing and leaning into, algorithms. And then, we're also, as you look at consumer consumption and us trying to find our audiences in the most effective way, you're seeing us lean into programmatic more and more, right? It's about reviewing your best practices. Are they still appropriate based off of the marketplace? It's really about being flexible.
Yeah, I love that that culture of experimentation and always learning. But not forgetting the fact that Hulu has a great foundation, so you can continue to continually increment your performance and learn from it. So with that being said, changing environments, new research that you guys have done, and maybe new insights, I'll ask you. There's been more and more of a drive, especially in the programmatic space, to anchor our campaigns to business outcomes, to drive to an ROI or like try to get that return on ad spend. Now, without asking you to give away the secret sauce at Hulu, I'd love to hear like what are some of the KPIs or what are maybe some of those like activity metrics that you think level up to being a true business driver?
Yeah, I will try not to give away too much of my secret sauce. Everyone that knows me knows that I love to just share and collaborate. But I mean, it goes back to really our ultimate North Star is growing our viewership. That's not a secret. And there is a combination of, us continuing to build relationships with our existing subscribers, but also bringing new members into our family. So really, we actually have a handful of KPIs that we look at. It really varies depending on what outcome we're trying to solve. It could be everything from brand consideration or awareness of our award-winning originals to viewership of our newly released content or driving incremental subscribers. The key is really about thinking about like what your goals are, building out the right measurement signals for you, and then making sure that you have timelines where you're reevaluating what your KPIs are and making sure that they're still appropriate for where you are in your life cycle.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a really intelligent way of going about it. For me, too often when people say programmatic, they immediately think performance, click-through rate or CPA. And the truth is, it just means that it's like, measurable. So what are those KPIs at each part of the consumer journey that we're interested in promoting? And then hopefully being able to connect those dots. And once again, working with your team, it's been fantastic to see like, hey, for this particular campaign or reason, like maybe we want to reach a lot of people and get the word out here, or maybe here we're trying to figure out who are the hand raisers who are engaged, and then finally who's maybe doing this or that. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about like connecting those dots in the consumer journey and making sure that the KPIs are appropriate for this point in time. And probably a lesson that we can learn from across the industry and various verticals.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that programmatic has been a larger and larger focus for you guys, and one of the most interesting projects we worked on together is the process of bringing some of your programmatic capabilities and your media buying capabilities in-house. And what's truly fascinating is this has been done in lockstep and in collaboration with your agency partners who still have a very important role to play. So obviously that's a big step. It's a pretty nuanced execution. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that process for you, why you guys made the decision and how you've been navigating, or what you've built that works particular to Hulu's needs.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when we think about in-housing and our relationship with agencies, at the end of the day, we value our partnerships with our agencies. And yes, we have been doing more in-housing of our biddable channels over the past couple of years, I would say. There's a role for both, and it really depends on the needs and what your vision is for your team are. There's definitely advantages to both those models, and there's also hybrid versions. So I think it goes back again to what are you striving for? What is the advantage for you to bring a channel or an entire team in-house? And there's definitely ways to think about how to do it.
Yeah, that's great. It's almost like a financial portfolio. You've got different pieces working for different objectives and different tools for each part of the job that's most effective. So that's really, really clever. And then how is your thinking on it? And so you mentioned you've been doing it for a few years. Like, has there been any evolution as you've gone through the process and learned different things? Like, what are the pros and cons? Maybe click a little bit deeper into like which parts work best for each.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my thinking has definitely changed over time. There was a day when I was on the agency side, and now there's a day where I'm sitting on the brand side. But when you think about it holistically, at the end of the day, I'm always supportive of making the adjustment, but it's also really equally important to understand the value of having an amazing agency like for us, their resources, the thought leadership, the partnership as a whole has so many great benefits. And if you have a strong relationship and a partner mentality, you also unlock so much value to drive your business. At the same time, there are many benefits to in-housing. To me, it's more about when could be the right time. What is our right approach? It definitely requires an understanding of what resources are needed. Do you have the right support team and structure in place? Our team was definitely very fortunate. My boss, my leader, was very supportive of this initiative and probably gave me and our team a little bit more of a push to just go for it as we were trying to be really methodical. Where he was like, let's take off the training wheels and we've done the risk assessment. Let's proceed. I also had a colleague that was great and very critical throughout all of this, Sarah, who really was collaborative and methodical with me in again, that risk assessment. And we also spoke to like a variety of resources, to understand like what are the best practices, how can we learn from our network based off of their experiences to really have that comfort.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And it's really interesting, like, your background coming from the agency world, living on the brand side for a while to really understand the dynamics of where those strengths lie and how to best utilize each part of that ecosystem. But it's certainly a big leap for many brands. If you were again, talking to a colleague or a friend, I'd be interested in hearing like where would you counsel them? What's the best place to start? If they're like, okay, I think there may be a place for this in my business model, but where do I get started? It seems kind of intimidating.
I know I keep saying what's right for me might not be right for you. So like when you try to keep framing this up with more questions for everybody, right? I think it goes back to like really thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? What is your end goal? Is there a cost benefit? Is it about owning your data? Is it about driving strategy and innovation? Because let's be honest, not every agency is as strong as others. So maybe that's an area where you're feeling some weaknesses in. But like really take the time to roadmap it out, be honest with yourself and your leadership about timelines. Really think about the roadblocks that you can run into that would actually even delay your transition. This could be anything from like a hiring freeze, right? Which is very well happening across our industry right now. What are your solutions for those delays? I think another critical element is making sure you have a strong MarTech lead. This is so critical. I can't stress this one enough. They're the ones that are helping you with your data contracts. They're working with legal, they're publishers, the transition of changing accounts from the agency to your organization. What is the impact beyond your team? Finance, account payables, legal. So think about it like maybe it's starting with one channel. Learn from that experience so that you can apply it to the next one and then expand. In regards to like what order, again, ask yourself like what channel would be more beneficial and maybe even like easier in making the adjustment. And so for us, you know, it could be channels like search and social being a little bit easier. Like programmatic to me is definitely a tricky one. When you think about all the data and tech needs and the time it takes to build all those, there's so many different pipelines. And you really need a lot of partners such as the trade desk, as you know, not only in setting everything up and guiding, but also in like the training and creating customized training of the team like you and I have had with our teams. But the advantages of like search and social, there's ad managers and platforms that can help make it a little bit easier. It doesn't require as much tech and out-of-pocket costs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you've got incredibly valuable experience. I feel like, you know, you could write a book and open a consultancy to help folks in the industry through. But, you know, some of the critical things that you talked about is like any big investment, roadmap it out, do your scenario planning and figuring out, you know, what are those forks in the road, and then making sure that you have like the in-house knowledge base to navigate, you know, all of those twists and turns. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, just know there's going to be road bumps. Think about how you're going to manage it. Have a colleague and a partner in crime that can be a shoulder to lean on when you're ready to pull out your hair, or someone that can calm you down. I was very fortunate, like I said, to have the team that I have, the people behind, you know, the team making this effort, and it really did take a village.
Having worked with that team, I can say, you know, one of the biggest differences, and I've gone through in-housing projects with a few different brands and they have different flavors, as you said. In this case, you guys were super, super collaborative. And one of those was having the trust, you know, to lean on us and ask for resources. Like a great example is, you know, and you mentioned this, we you know, when we started this project, there was the idea that we should train people in programmatic because it was complicated and it also represents a complement to many of the other siloed channels like social media. And so we ended up putting together a customized training program that talked to not only the folks, you know, at Hulu that are trading on programmatic hands-on keyboard, but your social buyers, your ad ops people. So everybody that, even if they tangentially would be affected by programmatic technology. And for us, that's amazing. Like we love to be evangelists to people, whether they're going to be in our UI or they're going to be part of the strategy sessions. But it also spoke to the level of trust that you put in the partners to be able to bring you resources that, you know, may not be available internally. And I think it's made our ability to deliver value for Hulu stronger. So I think that's fantastic. Well, Kendra, this has been an awesome conversation. There's one topic that I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't touch before the end, and I know probably a common theme, but you manage a robust team at Hulu, and obviously this year has been very, very different. Office life has transitioned from work from home, and we're talking about a lot of technologies, both from the consumer standpoint as well as the office standpoint, where people can log in remotely somewhat, but it still changes the dynamics. I'd love to hear how that changes the world for you, like how you help your team, especially when they're undergoing like such big changes and projects like in-housing or some of the other changes at Hulu. How do you manage that in this kind of unprecedented environment?
Yeah, I mean, the Zoom fatigue is real. We all talk about it. We're all experiencing it. My heart goes out to anyone that is a parent, as they navigate their family needs while, trying to also balance work in addition to now, helping with schooling and setting up their own video calls. I think really what we've been trying to do is just be open with the team. We try to comfort them where we can. We don't claim to know all the answers. We're as transparent as we, I don't want to say can either, but it's like transparent as much as I know and what I can share. I think it's just really critical that the team knows that we support them. We support and will make any accommodations that they need to make so that they can address any, personal experiences that they might be going through or changes. We've implemented some more meeting-free blocks across a couple days a week so that they can just have time to focus on themselves, maybe step outside. I just heard earlier before this call that apparently it's a really nice day outside in LA and that I should step outside of my house. I might need to take my own advice. And then even like this week, right? It's been a challenging week for the country, for everybody, a range of emotions. We were proactive with our team to say, not only take the time to protect your time so you can go out and vote and do what you need to do, but also, if you can limit the number of meetings that you're in, on those days so that you can just have time to think about yourself and your family, we support that. On the more fun side, one of the things that I started to do, thanks to advice from my friend Nina, who also amongst all of this decided to do a major career change and lean more into her life coaching, which I think is great, was she introduced me to this concept about walk and talks. So step away from the screen. If you don't have to see each other face to face, can you just put your earbuds in and put your sneakers on and go outside and have the conversation? At the end of the day, like, I'm not going to lie, I miss physically being with my team. I miss all of our side conversations. There's also a lot of challenges when we're onboarding new members who are really even new to the industry. And so we're just trying to do our best. We're trying to navigate through everything and just making sure everyone understands that we all have positive intent and we're doing our best.
Yeah, that, something that you described there that resonates really strongly is, just the concept of having empathy. Before, when we were in the office, you have those small touch points, the coffee or the chat over lunch or, those kinds of things where you could have those human connections and not so much of it needed to be said. But now where everything is separated by a computer screen or a phone call, for our colleagues, we have to go a little bit farther out of the way to let them know that, like, hey, we understand everybody's situation is personal. You mentioned parents, and I have 2 young kids, so I'm familiar with the ones running around, and I'm actually surprised there have been no cameos so far. But it took me a few months to realize, like, my colleagues that may not have a family, they have been sitting alone in their apartment for the last 3-4 months. Like that itself is a huge emotional drain, and having the space to have some of that empathy. And then that extends to our partners, right? So as an ad tech sales guy, classically we like to be in there for office hours, like support when there's big campaigns dropping, have those dinners or lunches as celebration when we finish big milestone projects. And all of those have become a little bit separated, and to avoid to remind everybody that this isn't a transactional relationship. We're both invested in this success. We have to get a little bit creative with those virtual team environments, especially across offices. That's definitely still an equation we're still working on.
Yeah.
We found some things that are fun that work. We're open to new ideas. It depends. It's funny. We had a virtual yoga session.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, works really well sometimes and like is kind of hysterically disastrous other times. But it is definitely a challenging environment. It seems like it's going to persist for at least a little bit longer. But it is a good reminder, challenge to like focus on that empathy with your colleagues, with your customers, figure out what place other people are in, and try to connect to that, and maybe be a little bit more verbal about it than before, when
absolutely,
that office contact could have taken that place.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
I agree with you.
Awesome. So we're not doing a Q&A, but there are a few curated questions that have come in, and so if it's okay, I wanted to send one of those your way. Let's see here. So we've got the latest one is what trends in consumer behavior are of particular importance to you and to marketers in general right now, and how do you see them consuming media differently?
I think it's just really fascinating to see more and more of the digital streaming and podcast consumptions continuing to grow. I think more so now while we're all at home and looking for ways to either dive into some of our passion points, maybe have some moments of escaping. These are all great platforms for everybody to lean into.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it hits on another question which had been about emerging media channels. I can tell you, you mentioned the walk and talks. Podcasts are my escape from the day, so that's a fantastic one that I think people are leaning into. So that's awesome, Kendra. I really want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us the last 30 minutes. Obviously, Hulu is an amazing brand, has some amazing content out there, and so we appreciate you sharing everything with us. And again, thank you for being a great partner to the Trade Desk and to Brand Innovators.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, both of you. That was such an excellent talk. I think that we all learned quite a lot. I was surprised to hear that everyone would be prepared to give up all of their friends and best possessions just to keep their Hulu subscription. That's an enviable position to be in. I hope that's how our customers feel about us. And thank you, Kendra, obviously, for your partnership.
Thank you.
And I also importantly want to say on behalf of myself and also the Brand Innovators team, thank you to all of the speakers and moderators for joining us today. I think that everyone's taken a lot from, and I know that I have. One of the key reasons, in fact, that the Trade Desk supports Brand Innovators is this sense of positive community and the emphasis on our industry coming together. And I think today we've heard really strong themes around brands, around how brands, publishers, and tech companies need to come together. And all the brands today, I think all without exception, have asked us to create some sort of common standard, work together to create that common standard for measurement and identity that everyone can use on the open internet. And because that's the way we probably will make advertising better for consumers and brands. And we certainly feel that that is the future of media. So thank you, everyone. And the last point for me to mention today is that we hope you'll all join Brand Innovators on Tuesday for another full day of marketing innovation. We're going to be joined by marketing leaders from Bayer, Intuit, Taco Bell, Avocados from Mexico, Bose, Austin Eastsiders, and more. So thank you once again for everyone today, and thanks for joining, and we hope to see you again very soon.